did my homework over lunch and.
Good afternoon, commissioners.
No, I can't remember.
Welcome back. Back to you, Chair Harrington.
Huh?
There's a letter from Portland too.
Yeah, I get that.
A letter from Portland.
Yeah.
Yep.
They're brought to
We don't
OPR.
things we.
A little different.
Yeah. Okay.
I know.
Welcome back to the work session of of the Washington County Board of Commissioners for this day, Tuesday, July 9th, 2024. We have had I need somebody to go. Carly, could you go upstairs and grab my backpack for me? We have an action-packed afternoon. We have multiple topics, ARPA, transportation, SHS, Metro SHS reform proposal, and then board and leadership communication. So we're going to start next with the ARPA presentation. And I don't usually use my laptop, but I left my stuff upstairs. So
There might be a change out.
you're going to see me look a little differently than usual. My apologies.
Well, good afternoon, Chair, Commissioners. My name is Danny Ledesma. I'm one of the Assistant County Administrators, and I'm here with Dorian, who is going to walk us through a little bit of a look back, update of where we are, and then some recommendations to move forward on this journey that has been the ARPA. So we are going to, we know that it's been an interesting day and with schedule. So we're going to try to give you a lot of information. You've had this before, so we're going to try to move through this quickly. And if there's any questions, we'll take them as we go. So I'll go ahead.
Please move at the pace at which we seem to need while you're taking us through. Okay?
Fantastic. Well, thank you. Howdy. Good afternoon. My name is Dorian Russell. I use they, them pronouns. I am the American Rescue Plan Act or ARPA program manager for the county. As Danny mentioned, the first portion of this presentation is largely a review of the ARPA framework that you already adopted in spring of 2023. And followed by that, we have a proposal from the executive leadership team that's been reviewed by your ARPA steering committee to allocate the remainder of funds. This is the final allocation of ARPA funds and a proposal for how we might do that. Could we go to the next slide?
Can I clarify?
Yeah.
that
Can we do it?
No,
While we had that steering committee meeting, the topic didn't finish by the end of the hour, so I missed part of it.
So first things first, just a brief refresher on the framework that you adopted in last year. So this should look somewhat familiar to you. Over the first framework and second framework, Washington County has strategically positioned ourselves moving from response to recovery and resiliency phases. So this timeline should look pretty familiar. You can see on that red line, we are here. What I would like to draw your attention to on this slide is that we are fast approaching our federal obligation deadline. And by obligation, I mean the date at which we need everything in a legally binding contract. So obligated funds doesn't mean we have to have it been spent out, but surely committed in a legally binding contract. And so that's coming up quickly at the end of this year. After we get everything in contract by the end of the year, we have until New Year's Eve of 2026 to continue spending out. This is your retired framework from 2021 to 2023. You'll see here much more emphasis on protecting public health, community stabilization, and wellness. Again, that transition from response to recovery and resilience. I'll spend a little bit more time on this one. This is the current adopted framework that we continue to implement on behalf of your board. I have included the link to your full adopted framework here. Additionally, in the slide deck on the following slides, there's a lot of narrative information that I included at the request of the chair and others just as a refresher, so you have that narrative information on what each and every one of these programs are and some of the anticipated outcomes. I'm not going to go into extreme detail on each of those following slides. Wanted that there for your reference. I do also want to let you know that this is the busiest time of the year for the ARPA team. We are preparing our annual report to the U.S. Treasury, and so you will be receiving a wealth of information from us and the outcomes to date in about a month from now on each of these projects. But at a high level, you've invested in workforce development, small business support, broadband, strategic planning, congregate care facilities focused on HVAC, public health mandates, revenue replacement focused on the ERP modernization, as well as effective ARPA management. Oh, go ahead.
I just interrupt you there
Yes.
for a moment to remind us all of the quality work that you and the team have done in satisfying those very complex U.S. Treasury rules, but more so because of the way that you've gone through this journey, enabled us to be very much a part of this journey together with staff versus just the board or just staff. It's been very collaborative, one Washington County approach. I know that there was recognition through Results for America initially for Washington County being one of a handful of counties in the country to being the one. I can't remember the details at the moment, but it bears repeating because of the level of work, the level of collaboration. And I'll say through my 18 years of government, this is the biggest set of information or dollars that we put into action through the community, through partners, stakeholders, CBOs, with all kinds of community input. And I am very proud of the work that you've taken us through to date, including adopting the 23-26 framework and implementing towards that end. So I hope I remembered enough of the high points.
Thank you, Catherine.
Before you continue, if I can just add to that, I just want to recognize the board for the learnings that the county had through the CARES funding. What was learned through CARES funding is that we did not, as a county, have our internal infrastructure ready to handle this large receipt of federal funds. And I use that as playing it forward. Staff are continuing to learn through this experience, and compliance requirements, not just with ARPA, but really any specifically federal funds, is significant. And so I just want to say that is a learning we're going to have to continue to roll into future county operations as we move forward, because we are eligible for other types of federal funding, and we do need to continue to pursue those opportunities. And there comes with an administrative overhead that we need to make sure that we're accounting for so that we do have compliance moving forward.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that was wonderful. I'll just state that for the record, Results for America assesses us based on our ARPA annual reports every year. And for our every annual report, all three of them, we've landed in the top 5 counties nationally for each report that we've submitted today.
I think is it 1,300 counties or 3,100? It's a big number.
So as I mentioned, there is a slide for each programmatic area. I'm not going to go in this in depth. Again, we will be providing comprehensive information next month for the annual report, but as supplemental information, you can revisit each of the project descriptions and the anticipated outcomes. You have a lot of projects in programs. Let me just put it that way. We're doing a lot of exciting and great work. Portfolio-wide, I'd like to spend some time reviewing the current spending trends, understanding that we have that federal obligation deadline coming. Here's a summary overview of ARPA spending across all of your investment areas. You'll see in the dark blue, that's the cumulative expenditures, dollars we've gotten out the door. And the chunk on top of that in that tan brown color is our obligations, so things that are in legally binding contracts. You can see in the lighter colors, that kind of sandy green and that light blue, that's our projection through the end of the year. We anticipate hitting 100% obligation by the end of this calendar year. Again, not wanting to give a single cent back to the federal government, and we'll see that expenditure line continue to increase through 2026 calendar year. Breaking this down by each of the different investment areas. Again, there are a myriad of different projects and programs within these investment areas. You can see here our rate of obligation and our rate of expenditure by investment area. Now, this is last quarter's data, and it may look somewhat surprising to see under revenue replacement or congregate facilities projects that the obligation rate looks a little bit low. I will say we have a small number of very high dollar contracts that are expected to go out over the summer and through September. So we anticipate in those areas, as all others, to reach 100% obligation, most likely by mid-September. And again, we're in the middle of an annual reporting period. We'll be providing you updated figures on these in about a month. Because I know that your board deeply values investment in community and our community partners, I did want to call out that we recently recompleted the assessment, took a look at every single contract that we've done with ARPA to date, categorized whether they were to community-based organizations or not. And of all ARPA contracts, 41% had dollars going directly through community-based organizations thus far.
Can I ask you a question on that one?
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
guess I probably should have just asked questions in previous slides, but we'll come back later on. Apologies. Could you disaggregate this 40% to tranche 1 versus tranche 2?
I'd be happy to do that. I don't have that in my pocket right this moment, but I could get that to you by the end of the day. And this is only what has been obligated to date. So this will change as we continue to engage in additional contracts.
For primer, one of the things that you can see is that in each of the previous slides, there's like a little icon that shows for each of the investment areas, whether or not it was, for example, there you go.
Includes CBO.
See that at the very
Slide are
bottom
we
where it
on?
says includes CBO.
Could you give us the slide number?
Sure, that's slide 21.
Thank you.
Oh, no.
Slides
21 is the
6
first one.
through 21, each of the slides that we have that provide narrative and outcome information for your programs, we've added a little purple icon showing where to date we also have CBO contracts.
Thank you. I
It's
didn't
a lot of
notice
slides. I
that
There
apologize.
isn't a slide number on it.
as I went through it.
25th slide.
No, there's a slide number on slide 21.
There is, but not on 25. Not on the 41% that we're talking about.
I apologize for that.
If you go to slide 21,
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
okay.
Right there.
Sorry,
Slide
on slide
21.
21 at the bottom, at the sort of like bottom right-hand corner, my right hand, it says to include CBO contracts. That little icon is there. So, well,
Thank you for pointing that out because I went through every single one of these slides and all of the great information, but I didn't notice that icon. So thank you.
no problem.
Don't think you were alone.
It's a lot of content. We're doing a lot of great work. Any other questions before we move on with spending trend information?
Yeah. Actually, I'd rather wait till later.
Okay, so we discussed large contracts that are coming down the pipe very soon. We discussed the proportion of community investment. So that's all of the review for, staff have been hard at work implementing the framework that you adopted. Now we come to the decision point here. So allocating the remainder. So from that first framework, there were a number of pandemic response focused projects that we discontinued. And the remainder from those projects are now not assigned to any project yet. So that's the decision point. We have a comprehensive proposal of ways that you might allocate these currently unallocated funds. This is the last, batch of unallocated funds that we have. So we would include this within your current adopted framework if your board decided to move forward.
So should we perhaps pause then talk about that part before we move on to the allocation? I do have questions on the previous slides, but
Sure, that's.
I don't know if
up to
we
your
want to
board.
get to the allocation piece, Chair.
Could we please go through the whole thing? And then come to questions at the end?
That work? So for the currently unallocated group of funds, it's about $4.3 million. Thinking about the approach, so the executive team, the steering committee, these are some of the thematic areas that really went into the thoughtful approach and for why the proposal looks the way it is. First, really intentionally wanting to strike a meaningful balance between investment that is directly benefiting the county's community partners and cities, while also recognizing that we have responsibilities in improving county service delivery to more effectively serve our residents. The second aspect of the approach behind this proposal is preparing for a more resilient future by investing really carefully in strategic initiatives that over time we anticipate will improve community experiences with the county service delivery. And finally, we know that ARPA funds are being used to increase investment in critical 24/7, 365-day-a-year facilities, primarily HVAC projects. And we're seeing cost increases for each of these projects as well. And these are essential service delivery to Washington County residents. So this is the backdrop behind what went into each of the projects within that allocation proposal. And this is that proposal. So each of these projects here, we are recommending to be funded with that remaining $4.3 million. You can see several of these have a yellow star icon. That's our intention in calling out specific projects that the executive team sees as having an elevated, more direct value to our community partners and cities beyond simply improving our service delivery. So you'll see here a continuation and extension to address the court case backlog. So positions that are working through that increase that was directly caused by the pandemic. You'll see here many different strategic initiatives. And I think going back to Tanya's point earlier about learnings from CARES and ARPA, this also includes an intentional investment in grants coordination. Additionally, related to preparation for the next strategic plan, creating an update to that Leading with Race report that was published in 2018. Moving forward with an equity map indicators project, providing the funding behind the urban services strategy and the staff needed to complete that, as well as providing county surveys, internal and external, to prepare for the strategic. The next investment area that we would propose adding to within your 2023 through 2026 adopted framework would be to increase the amount of funding for congregate care facilities projects, given substantial cost increases, as well as to increase project management and coordination, understanding that we need to get these dollars out the door very quickly. And so that would help us to mitigate risk and making sure that we can meet that federal deadline. Timeline for this, if your board wishes to move forward with this proposal, we would anticipate a board action to adopt these allocations. And given that some of these would be getting started on a later timeline, we would allow these contracts to be executed throughout the month of October. And finally, just one policy question for you today. Does your board approve of this allocation plan for that remaining $4.3 million to be distributed to each of these projects? Is there anything that you'd like to add on that?
No, I think you did a great job. I think just to hit on that, trying to strike that balance between directly investing in community organizations while also recognizing that as a county, to better and more effectively serve the community, we are in the process with your leadership and your support to build on these key management systems. If you'll remember when we talked about the the strategic plan update, that sort of schematic, that is one of my favorites, where we talk about building those key internal systems so that we can really organize well, so that we're more effectively serving the community. I think that this proposal, as we talked about it as a executive leadership team, is really trying to meet those three approaches that you saw on the slide earlier, to be able to ultimately better serve our Washington County residents.
Great. Well, turning now to board questions, comments, and board discussion together. Commissioner Fye, it sounds like you've got a bunch of questions straight out the chute. So why don't you go first?
Thank you, Chair. I'd be happy to. I guess I want to start, the bigger question of Tanya. Do we have legal contracts or legal contract that has been established? Because I'm
So
wondering.
she's not our legal rep, so we probably need to direct that to
Well,
county council.
So let me rephrase it because I do believe it's still Tanya question. I'm sorry, Courtney. But the part about I forget what slide number it was. Hang in there with me. The congregate facilities, the 10%, 24 million versus 2 million so far obligated. To make sure I like what you said, Dorian, making sure that we have a game plan that we are not gonna return some money to the federal because we don't want to do that. But knowing that expenditure is not necessarily, or expenditure is not necessarily an obligation, I'm wondering if we have any contract that has been established thus far. And if we have not and we're working on it, how comfortable are we to actually get to that by whatever date, September or October here? And if not, like, what are some backup plans of some projects in the fund, like, how do we line up? And I'll be transparent to say community investments. How do we line up projects like that to sort of like, just in case, kind of an option?
Okay, I'm hearing a few different questions in there, so I'm gonna kind of pull some threads out. I want to draw your attention to an email that I sent to your board within the last month. I will resend it to the board and ask that Clerk Moss include it actually in the packet, so it's available to members of the public. And that lays out the timing of the critical facilities. As you and your fellow colleagues on the board are aware, the board has had multiple touch points and conversations on the congregate care facilities, given formal direction to staff to move forward. Some of the key actions have been, we have a construction manager at risk. We are actively and confident that we will hit these milestones and can meet the plan that's presented to your board today. I want to commend both our facilities team, also Dorian and the team, for really doing the diligent work to make sure that we can deliver on those dates. You will be getting some contracts because there is some of the projects that need formal board approval. Those will be coming before you, and I don't have the notes in front of me right now, but I think it's September, October, but it is all that we will hit that December date. If we would not use the ARPA funds as your board has previously approved and allocated, there would have to be a different source of funding. You will hear in my leadership update this afternoon, frankly, just how critical these improvements are. And right now, just in this heat-related weather, the facility conditions are concerning. And so we are moving with full steam once again to get these projects completed. You see, and I'll lift up also the revenue replacement. The primary activity of the revenue replacement dollars is the portion of funding for the enterprise resource management system. Similarly to how we've been actively making sure those dollars are expended, Dorian and team have been actively working with ITS on that project. your board just approved, our ERP, contract, or gave approval to me to enter into contracting with Workday within the last few months. Once again, I don't have that date in front of me, so we're confident on these expenditures. In addition, similar to how we manage that end date for CARES funding, staff are working on this on a monthly basis. So if something would seem off track, we would be coming back to your board throughout this process as we move forward. Washington County should be proud because we did not leave any CARES dollars on the table. Even though the CARES timeline was ultimately extended, we expended all of those funds by December 31st. It was exhausting, but we did it, and I'm confident that the team will be able to do the same.
That's
This
because
time.
Courtney had a printing press for 58.
Yes, that was amazing. Tara.
Hmm?
Oh,
Back in the day.
So I
So-
hope I answered, there were multiple questions in there.
Yeah, I appreciate you answering, Tanya. Just looking more for the record, like what are the options to make sure no money is returned then? Because I don't think I've heard you clearly. And then the other comment that I want to make, and this is no criticism, but last time we approved the ARPA tranche 2 money was April or May of last year. We have not picked a contract. This is a significant, and looking at the job description, project description here, developing a competitive solicitation process that assess and rewards potential business partners for demonstrable commitments to equity, diversity, and inclusion. Like, how are we going to be really, if we had that much time and we have not yet picked that, but we're committed to doing,
Slide.
what is the,
Yeah, can I ask what I think the
I'll
first
pause.
question? Yeah, the first question was, staff are committed, and I believe your board has directed to not leave any dollars on the table. In my role as county administrator, that is my responsibility to work with Doreen and the team to be actively reviewing those dollars. If there appears that we need to come back to your board for additional allocation or reallocation, that will happen as we work towards the end of this calendar year. They are daily watching these expenditures because we don't want to leave the dollars on the table. So I believe your board has already directed county administrator, come back to us so that we're not leaving the dollars on the table.
thank you.
Okay. Then number 2 question was on a specific program. Can you refer to what slide you're talking about? I just want to make sure that
Slide 14, I was just, could be any of the,
HVAC related
congregate.
projects. We mentioned that we're committed to workforce diversity efforts in our solicitation process.
yeah. So if Danny and Dorian can talk a bit more about that process, this was included as part of a previous board briefing, and I think we can also resend those materials. As your board is aware, we have been actively building our supplier diversity program here at Washington County. This is the most significant capital investment that we've been able to kind of have forefront to be able to do that. And so staff between finance, facilities, OEICE, the ARPA team really worked in collaboration to ensure that supplier diversity goals were part of that contracting. I don't have that specific information at the tip of my, but we can follow up too with your board on what that process was used. This has been really a fortunate opportunity for us to look at how to further embed those supplier diversity goals in also future facilities projects, because we're able to learn from this contracting process. And I'm looking at Dorian and Danny if they want to add.
You covered it.
Okay.
Should I pause, or I have more questions, Chair, but I can pause.
How many
Give
questions do you have?
A lot.
Then you're going to need to take those offline.
No, I like to ask on the record, Chair. I like to ask these questions on the record.
Feel free to list your questions.
Yeah.
We'll have to have staff follow up.
I'd be happy to hear your answers. There's no rush. What's the rush? We have all day. We are here, so I would like to get an answer from the staff um, for the record and people who are watching. I have a question about the community investments or the strategic initiative project proposal. But before that, I do want to celebrate the power of lived experience and the importance of you, Danny, leading this work. I really want to commend you that because I'm not sure one of the initiatives, Coalition of Communities of Color, probably wouldn't have been here if it wasn't for lived experience and background experience in that. So I commend you that. Now, while I appreciate seeing that investment there for $250,000, which I'm not sure, for me, it didn't meet the mark. It many of these projects are studying impact rather than investing for impacts to communities. So I have a lot of questions about this. And one of the questions I have is, are those initiatives impacting community? And are we learning how we are partnering with community or how we're investing in communities? And then I had a question about the grants coordinator, in particularly to give grants to who? I had a question about what money, with what money are we this, and how many grants are we hoping to give if we are going to give to grants? And is this ARPA grants as well? Or
Would you like to take the
grants to
coalition one and
apply?
the
Is this
grants one?
person going to apply grants for the county? Yep, laundry list of questions. And then I wanted to know how hard is the deadline that Tanya, you mentioned in September? Is that a hard deadline? October, September.
Is that the,
So
is that
really
the
quick.
list of your questions?
Yeah.
Exercising presiding officer.
Mhm.
Is that the list, the end of your question?
Yeah, but I'd like to hear what Danny was going to respond.
So, I guess what I heard, I'll try to be brief. So for the 3-starred line items that you see there, I see that I hear your critique, and I see my perspective is that this is a twofer because we're able to invest into diverse suppliers in terms of community organizations that could help us develop these items. But it also is going to create a more diversified baseline of data. In our prior investment, we've invested in an equity data assessment. And so the way that I think that this is going to have a positive impact, not only on the community, but also on Washington County, that's going to allow us to be able to do some strong baselining work, some way to be able to assess and to continue to evaluate our work in terms of our aspirations around equity, inclusion, belonging, and diversity. So when we talk about the supplier diversity initiatives, what this work will allow us to do is to have that baseline of understanding across the community to be able to see how our efforts line up against those. So I really see these as having not only a positive impact directly to community organizations, but to the larger Washington County community, as well as helping us continue to build those systems so that we can more effectively serve folks who might be underserved in our communities. The deadlines that we've established are hard deadlines. And so one of the things that we're trying to cultivate here at Washington County is that sense of mutual accountability. And so Dorian and the team, as well as all of the executive leadership team, we all looked across the table and looked into each other's eyes and said, we have a deadline to meet, and we're all going to be mutually responsible to one another to ensure that that deadline is met because we think this is so important. Dorian and the team did a great job of establishing a sort of plan A, plan B scenarios, and what that cutoff is. All of the executive team, all of our direct reports that have sort of work in this area are well aware of those deadlines. during today's meetings, Dorian was also reminding through communications about that. So that deadline we see that as a hard deadline. We see that as a deadline that if it doesn't get met, that we'll sort of move into Plan B so that we can meet the overall objective of having everything allocated. So I guess I think that answers most of your questions, but
I do want to clarify that for the grants coordinator, this is not about the county providing grants to external agencies, but rather improving the county's systems in place to better be able to handle federal funds. While we did have a great deal of learning from CARES, we don't have a centralized grants management system. We don't have a grants management office. This sets the county up to be better prepared to get grants in the future for our own organizational resilience.
And I'll interject, this is not the first time that we've heard the need for that and the plan to advance this.
By limited duration, though, what you do.
Anything, any position that is funded through ARPA,
Oh, so you're talking about the position is limited.
Yes,
duration. Okay,
correct.
then I get that. Yeah.
Within the period of performance to spend ARPA dollars.
Well, we have a number of actually positions that we're facing that 26 and
that's right.
you included.
With my little wiggle, yes.
I know.
okay. So thank you for covering Commissioner Fai's questions over the last 15 minutes. Other commissioners, what questions and comments do you have at this juncture?
I have one comment. It's on the proposed project list with the stars, those stars. Just a suggestion. One of the things that I've heard from city groups as well as others is the county spends a bit of this money on themselves and not maybe more globally. I don't know why we don't put a star on the county care facilities, because frankly, in parts of this country, if we didn't have the jail facilities, if we didn't have diversion facilities, they would have to build them themselves if they want anybody else. So I think those, just my suggestion, I think those activities are for the benefit of the community and the cities. I really do. And so as you promote this expenditure list, I would also break down the total of 4.2 and say it's probably closer to about $2 million. If you added those plus those two other little stars, I might suggest you add, that would go to the community at large and not just simply the counties. That's just my
The
suggestion.
first one too, VAs.
You could do that one too. Yeah. So just a suggestion. I'd put stars on a few more things and then have the breakdown. What's just us, what's clearly grants coordinator, just us, county surveys, just us. But the rest of it, including the DA, would be much broader. I think it's a good story to tell. So that's all my comments.
Thank you.
Well, I think just to follow up on that, Roy, it's going to be interesting to see the answer to Nafisa's question on the pie, review the community investment, because if you take that broad definition, that 41% is going to significantly go up. And so, yeah, that might be a good refresh to look back on that and say, really, have we captured what we're intending to capture here? So, so yeah, I think that would be good. And to Nafisa's point, be able to break that out between ARPA 1 and ARPA 2. And so we can see where we're going with that.
But wait a second. There's framework 1, framework 2. The delivery by the federal government, Congress, Treasury decided to disperse the funds to counties in 2 tranches. That's not necessarily how we approached the frameworks. So I don't believe the rules require us to report by tranche. Okay, so it's sort of a wasted effort, in my opinion, to divide things by tranche, as opposed to how it's already been done in terms of our now retired first framework and our active framework.
Well, technically, tranche 1, the county has a lot to celebrate because I think we did a great job of investing in communities directly. So the community benefits was really clear because there's a quantifiable number of community-based organizations, quantifiable number of populations of residents of Washington County that we saved lives. So tranche two is internal. We're investing to fix county problem, which benefits the community, but is not directly benefiting the community. So there's that. So I think it's a bit of a, not fully transparent if we say 40%. That's where I was going.
Just for the record and for clarification, the 41% value is cumulative, so that includes both your first framework and your second. Chair, you are correct that we don't treat the two tranches as distinct, and your second framework includes a proportion of the tranche one and all of tranche two. So it is more effective for us to talk about
Framework
frameworks
one,
because we
framework
blended those funds because the feds don't treat them as separate. It's just we received them in two lump sums, so to speak. So
Mary, are you done?
Yeah, with my questions, I'm done. I've got a comment to make.
So I
Go ahead.
So could you make it?
oh, you want Jared to go first?
Okay, well, as I've said to you and the chair, that I was hoping, and I thought there was an intention that there would be, some of this money would be reserved for specifically for our nonprofits to have an opportunity to get funding for their own projects, not our projects. And so as much as I like your gold stars and all those kinds of things, those are projects that are going to benefit overall, but there are projects. And so I thought we were going to have money available for the nonprofits to have available for their own projects. So that's that's my disappointment in this. I think these are all, this is a great way to invest and spend money. But yeah, I had an expectation of something else. I think I've been pretty candid about that. Anyway, that's my comment. Go ahead, Pam.
When I had the opportunity to talk to Dorian yesterday afternoon, so this is pretty fresh in my mind, but it also gave me a chance to think over last night about where we were, where we've come from, starting with CARES, not just ARPA. And when we look at the entire event process and how the CARES money was responsive money that was into the community through many of our nonprofits as well to get to deal with the pandemic as it stood at that point. I also then think that the pandemic exposed so many of our weaknesses within the county that would have been exposed, but nonetheless, the pressures that we all felt, whether it was at the DA's office, in the congregate living, whatever it was, that we needed to address. So I see this as starting way back when the pandemic began with the funding that we got through CARES and moving, and I'm very comfortable with the way this has gone. And we are here to serve our communities. I don't have any issue with the proposed project list and how we address the community need that we see and recognize. So I'm thumbs up on this.
Thank you. So I'll go next. I really want to thank you, Washington County, for the great discipline across the organization in putting the board's framework into action, fully supporting our community, our partners, and Washington County employees through this whole duration. Thank you. This was a good and thorough presentation. I really appreciated how you included both of the frameworks for us and how you also included information in each of the categories. I just want to note on slide 6 under countywide workforce development, the last bullet, expansion of summer youth employment opportunities. We don't generally trumpet this at all, like multiple sister counties do. So kudos for making sure we got to see that. Let me share a couple of other positive comments here. On slide 24, the review of ARPA spending by investment areas from the last quarterly report submitted the end of April. Really key message here. A small number of high dollar contracts are expected to be completed through September, which will bring these investment areas that you've mentioned to 100% obligation. I really appreciated the information on slides 24, the community, 25 and 26 about the contract obligations to date and the reminder of how through both of these frameworks, there are dollars being put into practice by nonprofits, community-based organization, other partners, including through our partnerships with cities. And just in the subsequent slides from there, I do have two questions. First, on slide 8, which is titled Small Business Support. Over in the call out under community engagement, and you've had similar call outs in other slides, but this one I wanted to particularly come back to because you reminded us about how there was the COVID-19 Racial Equity Work Group, also known as CREW. So I'm wondering, to what degree have ACRE and the CBOs been reminded of the CREW involvement through all of this?
So we had a brief item at Acre last Monday. We didn't talk specifically to crew. We did sort of, we encouraged everyone to watch today. And there were some questions. We talked about the approach. We were pretty candid in terms of needing to find a balance between direct investment and indirect investment. And, you know, I think that's as far as we got in terms of the details.
Can I unpack an acronym just for members that may of the public? CREW was the
COVID-19 Racial Equity Work Group.
Thank you.
That was very
From my
You
head.
had it and then boom.
It was gone. Thank you.
Oh, no.
For the recovery.
Effect on you.
So that work group was established in the midst of the height of the pandemic.
2020.
Yep. To coordinate the efforts across the community.
And kept working while
Yeah.
we still had
That-
the emergency
Correct.
operations going,
Correct.
all of our CRF and right into the first half of 2021 until we had ARPA funding made available to us and moved onward to recovery, response,
Recovery and resilience.
So, as your board may recall, there were several themes that we heard from CREW at that point in time that have been embedded into practice here at Washington County. ARPA is not our only source of funding. As your board knows, we have varying different sources of funding. So one example was continued need to look at our system of housing services. And so within our SHS programming allocations, that is part of the reason rental eviction support has continued to stay within SHS, and we've used the carryover dollars to help support that. So the feedback heard from community, we can't just take that into account for ARPA. We have to look across all sources of funding and how we can continue to use that feedback. We now have the benefit of ACRE in place, and ACRE being that touch point with community on these types of funding sources as we move forward, not just ARPA, but SHS programming, other programming throughout the county.
May I add to that? I'd also like to elevate that the Washington County Small Business Support Network is much less formal than Acre is and much broader in its membership. And that is something that organically grew directly out of the COVID-19 racial equity work group and is much broader than just ARPA. Adrian Chalet and all of the staff in economic development have really had a collaborative approach with nonprofit organizations that are focused on economic development service delivery within that group. And that's something that can be sustained without just a pandemic response focus.
Thank you. Thank you for that addition, Dorian.
My last question goes to slide 29, titled Project, Proposed Project List. Thank you. Extend limited duration DA's office positions. Approximately how many positions is that?
3, if I'm remembering correctly.
Great. And I think with regard to summarization, we've had some interesting conversation here. There is a difference in my mind between investments that have gone through CBOs, as your prior slide with the 40% indicates, from countywide benefit. So what Commissioner Rogers was mentioning earlier with regard to those stars, there's countywide benefit. It's not necessarily dollars flowing through CBOs, but there are also dollars that are advancing our equity considerations. So, but I think what I've heard from the board discussion is ensuring that the county-wide benefit is better understood through the proposed project list. So, commissioners, we do still, if you could go to the last slide, still have the policy question that each of the 5 of us and the board in complete needs to answer. Does the board approve allocating the final amount of unallocated ARPA funds to this proposed project list? So who would like to go first in answering this question?
I can go. First of all, thank you so much for everyone for entertaining my questions and providing comments. The question you have here, I wish this was divided into 2 different sections. I think extending the limited duration DA's office position, I think that is a must based on the public safety letter that we put together and the challenges that we've heard. I think one of those big challenges were resources. And this is a way to address that resource constraint the DA is experiencing. So I'm 100% behind on the $860,000 onto the DA's investment. I still have a lot of questions about the urban services strategy and staff. I'm not sure I fully understand. It was not really articulated what that means or what that is included and how that is different than the service level assessment that we've been talking about earlier in the earlier discussion last year. When I say early, I mean last year. So I still have questions about that. I still believe that this is really, we're heavily investing steady in impact rather than community benefits. I would like to see the report update selfishly the communities of Coalition of Communities of Color 2018 Leading with Race report update, because I was involved and as a community member did participate that as a Washington County resident. So I would like to, but it's still that also does fall into studying impacts and not necessarily giving community-based organizations or nonprofits that amount to actually impact the residents, to actually, have something that isn't just a report that we get, that we can probably estimate what that would look like in a less heavier lift. County surveys, I still believe this. I still have questions about the congregate care facilities. There's $300,000, and then there's 870,000, and any other underspent. I have questions about what the magnitude of the cost increase is. And what are we looking in our discussions about if we're gonna bond and how much that bond looks like, and does it really make sense? If we invest in communities, these $4 million, and we bond extra. So I still have a lot of those questions. I thought about in the spirit of cooperation, voting yes, but you know, that's not what the residents of District 1 elected me to do, to vote in the spirit of cooperation. So I'm going to be voting no. You won't be getting, that's not because of the result of your work. You've had multiple conversations with me. We try to sit down. You've tried to sit down with me, but I'm on vacation. So I apologize for that, but I appreciate you trying to really have that briefing with me. I've read your materials. I track this work. I have tons of community conversations. That people are really hurting. The system will survive, and I do believe in investing in the system so that it's there for the people when it needs it. But I also believe the yes and part of reality and living life. So I won't be voting in support of this, but I do support the DA, and I do support, I think I see a potential for the grants coordinator position. And
For the
If I could
benefit-
clarify, if I understand what I heard you say, for the $66 million that needs to be invested in the critical facilities, that you still have need for understanding on what that is. There is no bonding proposed for that investment, by the way. Bonding is separate. So am I correct in understanding that you're asking staff to help you better understand that $66 million obligation that we've already approved?
no, thank you for trying though, Chair. What I heard is the amount that was proposed for the congregate care facility increased due to cost of construction, inflations. I have not seen a dollar amount yet, other than, yes, 60. But then here also it says 870,000. So I'm just saying that we don't know the total number of what the cost increase is.
I think 2 points of clarification. One, I will work with the board clerk to make sure that the email that Tanya provided to the board that details quantitatively the increase in cost gets in front of you. I apologize that that wasn't included.
No, it was there, but maybe I'm misunderstanding it.
I will say the congregate care facilities pieces here will not anywhere near cover the increase in
Mhm.
cost. This is just a portion of it. And I do, for the benefit of the public and shared understanding, the urban services strategy and staff, this is the project that is being led by Erin Wardell in land use and transportation in partnership with city governments and special service districts to take a look at assessing the county's urban service delivery. So that's an assessment that is separate and distinct from the service level assessment. It's more cooperative with other partners. So I apologize for not going more in depth on that piece as well. But certainly when it comes to congregate care facilities, this is to help mitigate our risk in getting those dollars out the door before the end of
So the 870,000 is enough. I feel like I'm having a nevertheless she persists moment here, but I can back off and.
I think Tanya might want to jump in.
So we will send an email, follow up and make sure it's added to the packet as well, just for members of the public, that clarifies all the funding sources going into the critical facilities. For just
That was already in a
Yep.
work session packet time, by the way?
Yep.
Just so no one's
For
confused.
yeah, for members of the public that may be listening, we had no dollar set aside for these critical facilities. So we have, in essence, had to piecemeal together different funding sources at the same time that we have been making significant general fund reductions across the county. And so when we do talk about bonding, those bonds need to have a repayment source, which, as your board had discussed at that time, would have resulted in further general fund reductions too. So, but we will include that kind of just clarification of the dollars and still what is the gap that we need to continue to close on those critical facilities.
Other commissioners?
I made my comments earlier. I'm thumbs up.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I want to make sure that I communicate appreciation for the work that you've been doing and continue to do on this. And certainly we are very fortunate that we have this money to fix some of those things and can use that. So I'm very happy about that. So I've already communicated my unhappiness side, but I'm thumbs up on this.
Thank you. Commissioner Rogers?
One minor change. This is my accountant brain. You keep talking about 4.3 million to allocate and you're allocating 4.240. Can we take the other 60,000 and throw it onto the congregate care facilities?
Correct.
That all balances and I'm happy.
And any other underspend.
Yeah.
Or Roy's lunch money account.
Yeah. I don't know.
I don't think that would pass Treasury rules. All righty, so as for me, I want to thank you, staff, for, each of these proposals, including the update for the Leading with Race report. As I mentioned in our steering committee, I have a long history, given my lived experience as a white person, in supporting this effort and continuing to be committed to advancement of equity in general, as well as a good data assessment. I also want to thank those of my colleagues who have really endeavored to keep up with the massive amount of information that our staff has made available to us, especially through the course of this year, 2024, and you're working diligently to digest that and to make yourself available in a timely fashion to have your questions addressed by staff. I am very much in thumbs up for this. Like Commissioner Willie, there are things that I wish we could have done differently. I think this is our best foot forward for investing in programs across our county as this framework and set of information highlights. And I really appreciate the effort that you've put into this to ensure that we all have the availability of the information. Thank you.
Were you here for kids?
So if we could, Commissioner Willie was just asking Dorian about when she came on as a county employee working on this. It was with ARPA funding post CARES Act CRF funding.
Pam and I were just comparing notes with how much CARES money we had and how short time frame we had for that, and the staff really stepped up. And again, I give Courtney a lot of credit for cranking out those IGAs, and so then we have kind of a phase 2 of ARPA money, and so it's been a 4-year.
So
venture.
it was a very different time. We set aside a lot of county work.
Yes.
And had employees that would have otherwise been laid off. And with the CRF funding, we were able to reassign them to COVID-directed uses. And because of the set aside, some of our it consumed all of our staff bandwidth and more. And we learned through that, that our staff really suffered through the course of that, to the extent that some of our city mayors did not understand the impact of some of their insistence. We tried to make sure through our ARPA framework that in putting the dollars into action, following the Treasury rules, that we were doing so while also investing in the level of administration and follow through as needed for us to be good stewards of those dollars, which is the point you're making here, and complimenting our staff in doing that great work.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on to our next topic, bicycle facility selection for Thompson Road Improvement Project, Beaverton, Saltzman, and Marcotte Roads. And true to our normal form, after this topic, we will take a break. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. I'm Stephen Roberts, Land Use and Transportation Director. And with me is Russ Knoble, our Capital Projects Division Manager. And Russ, he's got-
Yeah, and then right behind us is Ben Lively, who's our Senior Project Manager on this project.
Hi, Ben.
Yeah.
I've seen your name before, and you may have even come before us as well, but it's great to have another opportunity to connect the name and the face. Thank you for being here.
Yes, and so we wanted to make sure Ben's here in case you have questions that he'll be in a better position to answer. So as you'll recall, this is a recurring type of presentation that we come before you all seeking some board input and guidance on bicycle facilities for capital projects. So in the interest of time, we'll move fairly quickly. And again, we can always pause for questions along the way or come back toward the end if you have any questions. And I did want to just remind you, this is one, we're talking really about just one sort of isolated aspect of the project today, the bicycle facility type. This is just one step in many, many steps yet to come on this project as well. So we'll just run through the topics that you see here in the outline. And then really the prompts, the discussion questions for you today are really, do you need any additional information that would help inform a decision about bicycle facility type? And do you concur with the recommendation that we'll present to you later in the presentation?
Just for pause, Commissioners, would you want to take a break now before we get too deep into this topic versus waiting?
No, I'm okay going ahead right
Yeah.
now.
I just wanted to
Right,
check.
you.
grab some water.
Yeah. We're going to keep going while you do that?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Keep going.
All right, thank you, Chair. So for context, a little bit about the location. So that, as you just said earlier, this is Thompson Road. It's the portion between Saltzman Road and Marcotte Road. Marcotte Road is essentially at the county boundary as it was adjusted. It's 2014. I know you and I were there, Chair, for the party. But when that Area 93 UGB expansion was brought into the county. And so this is yet another extension of other improvements that are also happening on Thompson Road just to the west. You'll recall that we have a project that I think may actually be under construction in earnest right now for the realignment of the two curves on the west side of Saltzman Road. And then just for context and a reminder to your board, there's also the Saltzman Road realignment project, which you've provided previous input on the alignment for that project, which at this time remains unfunded for full construction. The area is predominantly residential. The red and the gold color here indicate two different densities of residential. There are a couple of blue parcels. Those are what we call institutional use. The one on the south side of Thompson near the what we'll call the curve is a water storage facility operated by Tualatin Valley Water District. And then at the corner of Saltzman and Thompson Road, the northeast corner, there's sort of an L-shaped gray parcel. That's a neighborhood commercial center. In the transportation system plan, Thompson Road is classified as an arterial, so that's the highest level or one of the highest levels of roadway. It's meant to be sort of one of the major roadways in the area. This just gives a quick look at future, current and future anticipated traffic volumes. So as you can see over time, as there's build out in the area, we do anticipate travel or the number of vehicles traveling the roadway will increase fairly significantly. It has a pretty low percentage of heavy vehicles, probably mostly moving vans, delivery trucks, that sort of thing. We expect that to remain fairly constant over time.
Can I ask you a question on this data? Not specific to this data, but the track record, so to speak. I'm wondering if you've ever done a look back of projects where you've had estimated traffic volume, maybe even as far as 2025. And you actually took a look at that facility in the now. I realize we're only, in the middle of 2024, but 2024 just seemed like an odd year forecast to see how did the actual compare. Now I know there's a plethora of variables. So I'm just wondering about that. And as I mentioned the variables, I am really struck by the number of electrified transportation devices that are on our arterials and collectors of significance, including a range, some legal, some illegal, or not legal, I should say, of electrified scooters, skateboards, of different
Monowheels.
devices. Yeah, exactly. So, you never know what another 20 years will bring.
I would say currently, and I don't know if Russ has anything to add on this, but I would say that certainly I think the future is less clear than the past might have seemed, if that makes sense, in terms of just the points that you raised, that the way people travel is changing. So, and honestly, if we're successful, we won't see that many trips in the future, right? Hopefully we'll be able to see more transit trips and fewer single occupant vehicle trips or more other types of travel. So
let me be clear. I don't have a problem with that this is a future forecast and what the number is. It is what it is. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. Thank you.
And now.
So here we are. We're going to talk a little bit about what things are like right now. So Ben was kind enough to sort of look at this and identify that there are really three sort of existing contexts or segments that we thought would be appropriate to think about. Segment one is the westernmost portion, and it's partially improved. Some of it has 3 lanes, some of it 2 lanes. Segment 2, we called out just a little bit differently because that is what we're calling the curve area, and that's been a topic of significant community interest and continues and will continue to be. And then segment 3 is a little bit different too, in that there's a lot of existing development, much of which is very close to the existing roadway. So we wanted to think about the context in that specific area a little bit differently as well. One thing that we've done on this map as well is tried to identify that there are some parallel off-street routes where if someone is looking to cycle or walk through the area, there are some opportunities that give them places to do that off the main roadway here in this specific area because of the parallel interconnectedness. And some of those will be extended in the future. Right now, there's limited connectivity, but that will grow over time. So this is a quick photo. This is looking east. All of the photos actually will be looking east. This is from near Thompson Road looking east. So this is what we were calling segment 1, the western portion. You can see there are sidewalks, maybe hard to make out in the photo, but there are sidewalks on both sides, but there is no center turn lane. There are no bike lanes, no curbs and gutters and drainage. This is segment 2, the curve segment. This is taken near the apex of the curve. Again, looking east. And so you can see that there is a 5-foot or 6-foot probably sidewalk on the north side of the roadway adjacent to an existing subdivision that is part of the Area 93 or Bonnie Slope West development area. Still no bike lanes, still no center turn lane, and still no stormwater system. And this is the easternmost, what we're calling segment 3. So this is just as you're leaving the area that's been developed on both sides, the subdivision area. As you move a little bit further east, you will see, as I mentioned earlier, there's development that's fairly close to the roadway currently. And again, similar conditions, no turn lane, no bike lanes, no stormwater.
I've been proudly riding that road, solo bikes and tandems for 34 years.
So are you saying we don't need them now? It's been, you made it all those years.
Well, our objective will be to make it better, Commissioner. So maybe it's not just brave people like the chair will be out there.
Just brave. That's a hard hill.
It is that too. That too. So one of the things that we typically look at in these, what we refer to as conflict points. So where are the places where vehicles are entering and exiting or crossing the roadway? So at the far west end of the project at Saltzman Road, there's an existing traffic signal, so a major intersection there. There are 6 side streets, most of which are just on one side of the road, but there is Hibbard Road or Drive, which does cross Thompson Road. And then as you can see, particularly as you go further west, there are a number of existing driveways. Again, a distinction in the differences between the various segments there. So we'll take a look at some bicycle facilities. So our policy says that when we come to your board, we're going to bring you at least one example of what we call a kind of enhanced cycle facility, something that's off street or that is what we would refer to as kind of a protected bike facility. So in this case, what we're showing you is a design where all cycle traffic would be expected to use 10-foot multi-use paths on the sides of the roadway, on both sides of the road. And you can see that the road would be built out at its ultimate configuration with a center turn lane, curbs, stormwater, all the rest of those urban amenities. And I should say that was also the far west portion, so between Saltzman Road and Hibbard. So that's actually referred to as segments 1 and 2 in the map that we saw earlier. And then to the east of...
I go back, I just noticed, because I was asking our right-of-way, but you say estimated right-of-way here is 72 feet. The next one you say 60 feet. So is that because that's all we have available, or is that because skinning it up?
Yeah, so you'll see in the difference here, there's no center turn lane on the second one,
yeah.
right? So that reduces the width by about 12 feet.
Yeah, okay.
And yes, and that is in response to the fact that there is a limited amount of right-of-way there, and some of the development is up fairly close to the roadway. Okay. So we are looking at opportunities to try to minimize the right-of-way impacts in that segment there. And so, yeah, so in this section, no center turn lane is the primary difference here, and that does reduce the overall right-of-way need by about 12 feet. And then the second option that we want to share with you, again, we'll have multiple cross sections that we'll look at here. So this again is now a slightly different extent here. So this would be Saltzman to 128th Avenue, which is the very first street intersection east of Saltzman Road. We would propose on the north side of the street a 10-foot multi-use path and on-street bike lanes in both directions, and then just a typical sidewalk on the south side. And the purpose of the wider path on the north side would be because we do have proximity to Findlay Elementary School, a future park site, both of which are on the west side of Saltzman Road, and the neighborhood commercial center along this frontage. this would just help facilitate more trips for students, people that may be accessing the park and the neighborhood commercial center to be able to potentially ride their bikes off street if they're trying to access those more immediate uses, and creates a good tie to the capital project to the west of Saltzman, which will have 10-foot multi-use paths in both directions. And you can see the estimated right-of-way width here is about 80 feet, so it's a little bit wider because of the bike lanes. And then this is looking now from 128th Avenue to Hibbard Drive. So in this case, we would just have the on-street bike lanes and standard sidewalks on both sides of the roadway, but retain the center turn lane, estimated width, right-of-way width about 75 feet. And then in that far western portion, again, what we call the constrained section here, we have dropped the center turn lane, but otherwise the road design remains similar, still has the on-street buffered bike lanes. What we've proposed here is an 8-foot wide curb tight sidewalk. And this would be very similar, Commissioner Treese, up in your neighborhood where we did this on Cornell Road. That's actually been working quite well. It does provide a wider than typical sidewalk if you have less experienced cyclists, kids in particular, maybe that would feel more comfortable riding on a sidewalk rather than a bike lane. And it's still fairly efficient space-wise. And so this gets us down to a right-of-way width of about 58 feet. But it does still retain those on-street bike lanes for cyclists who may be more attuned to riding in a roadway. So we've done a table to just, this is pretty typical, try to compare how these various alternatives compare. So the left column is the existing condition. What I would call the middle column section, selection 1, which was the multi-use path option. And selection 2, then the option that had the on-street buffered bike lanes throughout. And so we've just sort of taken a look at which ones provide maybe the higher levels of cyclist protection. So clearly the off-street path would probably be considered to be the one that has the highest cycle protection. We've assessed approximately how many, what we call right-of-way acquisition files, how many properties would we potentially need to acquire property from, right-of-way from. And so those do vary a little bit. Selection 2 is a little bit higher in terms of the number of properties impacted, and the area significantly higher in terms of the square footage that's needed. And then it's selection 2 is also a little bit more expensive, about $8.6 million versus just under 8 for the first option. So we did want to obviously mention some public input that we've received today. We have held an open house online for this project. It's been just a little over a year ago. We had a lot of traffic to that, 444. We received about 43 written responses. At that time, we were preparing a couple of different options. One was on-street bike lanes, one was cycle tracks. And then our staff worked on developing this idea of a multi-use path option after the open house. That was based in part on some conversations that we had internally, but also a little bit of the feedback that we received through the open house. So during that initial open house, we had about 17 comments where people expressed a particular bike or pedestrian facility preference, and those are shown here. We had about 5 that liked option 1, which was the on-street bike lanes. About 6 clearly said they preferred option 2, the multi-use path. 6 that seemed to be amenable to either option in terms of moving forward. We did receive a number of requests to address the curve that we mentioned earlier that's west of Hibbard Road, as well as addressing an existing site distance concern at that location. And then still just concerns about, right-of-way impacts. This is true on every project, just concerns about right-of-way impacts, and a number of folks who just requested some additional information or wanted to meet with our staff in person. So the staff recommendation, all things considered, is what we're referring to here as selection 2, and that is the version that primarily relies on the on-street bike lanes. And some of the reasons for that here, I'll jump to just a quick map. So the breakdown here doesn't quite match the segments that we started with evaluating earlier, but we did want to just explain how this plays out. I know just a bit differently, but so again, the westernmost portion is where we would have a 10-foot multi-use path on the north side adjacent to the neighborhood commercial center. Again, we think that provides a really nice tie-in to the 10-foot paths that will be built west of Saltzman. It will provide a place off-street where a cyclist could potentially ride and then start utilizing some of the internal neighborhood streets rather than riding in adjacent to the roadway internally. And so we think that's a good solution right at the intersection. In the middle there, we would just have kind of our standard 3-lane cross section with on-street bike lanes, standard sidewalks. And then again, in the west, keep getting my directions messed up. On the east end, the green section, we would have what we call the sort of constrained version that doesn't have the center turn lane, but keeps the on-street bike lanes and the standard sidewalks. I know we're moving quickly, so we certainly can come back to this too. This just shows those cross sections again. So again, the far west section with the multi-use path on one side and on-street bike lanes. Section 2, 128th to Hibbard, again, standard sidewalks now on both sides. And then the constrained section, so the on-street bike lanes, no center turn lane, and then the wider sidewalks to accommodate a variety of different riders or pedestrians. And I should have mentioned too, so one of the benefits of a design like this, and one of the reasons that we actually implemented this design on Cornell Road was, again, just given that we had so many driveways in such close proximity, as a cyclist, you would, if that was a cycle track, you'd have an awful lot of sort of up and down motions all along the way, which can be quite both uncomfortable and potentially dangerous as you're riding at speed. And so we felt like giving the option of more experienced cyclists being able to ride in the street, less experienced cyclists potentially using the sidewalk is a good solution here. I think I just probably said most of this. Yep. So I won't repeat all of that. And that brings us back to our discussion prompts. So we're happy to jump back. As I said, we went fairly quickly in the interest of time, but happy to go back and address any questions or comments.
Great. Commissioners, questions and comments?
Yeah, I have one to start is, it seems to me that like back in 2019, we as a group, I thought, adopted what our basic street plan would look like for bike and ped and cars. So we said, we're going to build them this way. And that was going to be our standard plan. So am I not remembering that correctly? And because we've got basically 3 variations that we're going to do in this stretch of street. So some of that's restricted by right of way. I get that. But I thought we'd kind of made a decision as to what they would look like. So we did have some consistency.
So I think what you're probably referring to, we did bring forward some preliminary work on a update to our road design standards. And that was with the idea of, well, there were a couple of overarching objectives to that. One was to just update our standards to reflect the way that we're actually building most of our roadways today, reducing lane widths actually a little bit from our prior standard. To try to help with managing speed and just be a little bit more efficient in terms of using the space within the right of way. And the other option was really introducing more context sensitivity. And I think this actually is a pretty good project where you're seeing that we're trying to respond to the differences in the context just along a relatively short, less than 3/4 mile project here. We're actually kind of looking at 3 different cross sections, trying to be more sensitive to the different needs and contexts within that project. So that
Mhm.
that work has not been finalized yet. We're still in the stage of trying to get all the engineering drawings wrapped up, and then we will be bringing that back forward to your board for adoption at some point in the future. But I think this actually is fairly consistent with all of the thinking that has gone into that work so far.
Okay.
Who's next? Thank you, Commissioner Will.
I don't have any comment, hoping that someday you don't have to bring these things to us, that you adopt a bicycle plan and that you have some standards and that you come in with a recommendation. Gary pointed out you have some standards, and I understand that they have to fit the topography, but I trust your judgment. So your recommendation's fine.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioner. And I was just going to note, we are actually bringing forward it'll be a consent agenda item for next Tuesday. That will be an application for an ODOT and DLCD Transportation and Growth Management Grant. And that will help to fund our work to develop an active transportation plan, which is exactly the thing that you're talking about. We do want to try to make system level decisions about future bike facilities on roadways throughout the county, and hopefully remove your board from the need to go through these kind of ad hoc decision-making steps. So thank you.
And I appreciate your diligence in following through on the direction that prior boards gave and adopted still the code that says put together at least one option and bring it to the board. But as Commissioner Willie and Rogers have noted, time has passed. Our thinking's advanced. Commissioner Treese and Commissioner Fry.
I just appreciate the work that you've done and the input from the community, the flexibility of the design to adapt to what the situation presents, and I'm supportive of your recommendation.
Thank you. I'll start with really good work in the examination as well as in the options you've pursued with community as well as this recommendation. I do have a clarifying question, and I really appreciated slide 24, this one. And noting the continuity that spans from the blue to the orange in the various aspects, and then onward through the green. I think it offers the most people, whether they're traveling by foot or by non-auto or service vehicle or truck wheels, multiple alternatives. I do have a couple of other points. And that is, I would ask for a legal opinion with regard to our adopted policies with regard to safety, and in what way is safety defined, and before we adopt the next thing, which this recommendation, I want to make sure there's time for county council to do that research in our adopted plans of policies and make sure that we have comfortable assessment moving forward. So it's a big question, I assume. So, but I think based on some input that I would be most comfortable in adopting a recommendation, having the benefit of further information. I don't know if the input constitutes a legal threat or not. I just don't know. I need some help. Thank you. Are there any other commissioners interested in that?
I just looking at this one thing, it's like selection 2, the one that you've recommended, we're acquiring considerably more right of way, but the price isn't really all that much different. So
8.6 versus 7.9.
yeah, so, but we're acquiring from
Yeah, but-
7,100 to 35,000 square feet of right of way. So, so yeah, I was just wondering that doesn't quite equate. I figured it'd be a lot more.
Yeah, yeah, every project is unique and, so,
Amen.
yeah. So yeah, this is an instance where, I asked the same question and to confirm the numbers and, so it does look like a significantly larger right-of-way acquisition. But it is what it is. And, like I said, we think that, even though it may be a bit more impactful, we do think that it's a good return on investment for the community's, expenditure. This is a one-time expenditure that will last us 40, 50.
Oh,
years.
I'm not questioning that at all. I'm just saying, yeah, the comparatives there weren't consistent. So we bought the right away from Costco. We got the package.
So lastly, I'll share really just as anecdotal information. In my thinking about the use of these different travel pathways, I don't mean necessarily a physical pathway, but options of travel has really evolved as we've seen more variety. Commissioner Treese was touching on the variety of wheeled devices. But just today, frequently as I'm going over along Western Avenue, which is recently improved in Beaverton, including a cycle track, I've had the opportunity to see on that road that has vehicle traffic, including truck and bus traffic, school bus traffic, the interactions of post scooters, if I can call them that, versus those uni-wheel ones, which I've also been observing, and bicycles. And it's been interesting to me to see that despite there being width, I'm amazed that this post scooter goes faster than 30 miles an hour. You won't catch me doing that. But I assume it's because of that speed that the scooter doesn't want to travel on the cycle track with the bicycle and instead chooses to use the roadway. I don't recall that there's a bike lane there. So I've learned a lot by observing these various devices that I'm not brave enough to use. I'll also observe on Thompson Road, there are a lot of experienced bicyclists using this roadway, including traded sector employees. Just want to recognize that. We've already talked about the cost and essentially the amateurization. Is that the right word? Of that over decades. So I am fully thumbs up on this sector selection too. Wanted to make sure I used the right word. Really appreciate the work. Oh, sorry, the one, I forgot my own list of questions here. On this slide, I appreciated your covering or including the, what do you call them, the parallel cycling route options. However, the one thing that I've learned as both a solo cyclist and a tandem, the value of those alternatives is only as good as the intersection treatments. So if your recommendation does not include intersection treatments that can offer safe options, for multiple types of wheeled devices, including long tandems, then you're highlighting them as parallel cycling routes may not hit the widest audience that you may be trying to attract. I'll just leave it at that. But it is good to know. And I also wonder if you're potentially looking at some future grants for marking those as a neighborhood bicycle route, just as the city of Portland has done with those little green markers to make more people, especially neighborhood people, aware of those as routes.
Yeah,
That's all.
and that's a great point, Chair. We have done some preliminary planning around a neighborhood bikeway plan, and it's been one of those things that for want of some funding and staff, we have not been able to roll out, but we're actually hoping to roll out a test in the Rock Creek area in the next year.
Yeah, I think it's great that you've done that. I just wanted to raise it to encourage the opportunity.
And you mentioned it, I'd just like to highlight again, that just west of that last intersection
Marcotte
is
west.
Saltzman.
Yeah.
Is Finley School,
Correct.
and also the potential new park there. So it's even going to grow in usage as that is actual. So I've watched every single day. Cornell, the usage of those that new infrastructure is gone like this.
Yep. I live in a similar area where when sidewalks were added, suddenly there was a major proliferation of people walking.
Build it and they will come.
They will.
Where'd you come from?
Well, Jackson School Road is a prime
Yeah.
example of that. I go at Jackson School every day going back home, and yeah, the
Cycles.
amount of people that are walking, riding their bikes and everything else has significantly improved. So, yeah.
And the other thing,
And let's hope we see it on Tualatin Sherwood Road
Yeah,
when
no
it's
kidding.
finally completed. When you were talking about 2019, that is where my mind went. So I appreciate your raising the other part of our 2019 experience.
and I think, Chair, when you mentioned traded sector employees, I think you were referring to like commuters, people that use bikes on their way to and from work. Is that what you were talking
And during the course of every day.
Yeah. And
7
so we're
days a
really
week.
seeing that go up, that's wonderful.
Yes, and maybe before we close, I know we have a community member here who has been very interested in the project as well, and I know she's provided some additional comments to your board, and I just want to stress and come back to something I mentioned earlier, that we are continuing to work on site distance issues, evaluating the design of the roadway itself, the curvature, all of those things that are going to be an ongoing part of the project design. So we're not done with those decisions at this point, for sure.
So what's the timeline of this project? Just moved that. So what's
So Ben and the project team are approaching the 30% design status, and so I would guess, I don't know, Ben, maybe you can.
Reminder, this project is funded through the MISTA Bonding Cost Sharing Program and the Bonnie Slope West Transportation System Development Change.
Yeah, so Commissioner, regarding schedule, we're just at about 30% design. We'll progress into the winter of next year to maybe a 70% design. So we'll finish design ideally in the spring or the winter. There'll be a right-of-way process that will take probably up to 9 months. So you can think of us finishing design, and then, a good portion of next year will be right-of-way acquisition.
we're talking 26?
We're talking 26. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Wheels move slowly, man.
All right, I think
Okay.
that's it on this topic. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you all.
Okay, we are now going to take a 15-minute break, so we will reconvene at 3:10.
And during the break, I want to just appreciate the quick responsiveness from facilities. Dan is here. He's going to be opening the doors between the two rooms. I apologize for the heat. We're actually having a problem with the chiller that impacts this space. So facilities is working on it, but to give us some relief, we'll be opening these doors.
Thank you.
Yes.
I don't know, but
I didn't even, I wasn't the only one.
Friday.
back,
Nope.
commissioners.
Turn
Back
that
to you,
down
Chair
a
Harrington.
bit So I can hear everything that's said over there and I'm not,
Also, feel free to move over here.
oh, next to Roy?
Yeah, that would be wonderful. I could.
Leave me.
You weren't supposed
Aim
to
it
laugh
this
at that,
way.
Ella.
Could you aim it this way?
No, we're good.
Leave me, doesn't have any vision.
There's a static corner over here. That's better. Thank you.
Ah.
So as we get started with the next item, I just want to also just once again appreciate facilities for their quick response. Let your board know that Sips and Sammy's will be, that's our lunch cafe. They're in their process of closing, so they will be coming through with a cart using that side door. But I just want to let you know that hopefully will be the only disruption during this last item.
And I know that John Wheeler sent an update today.
It's not
Wow.
even gonna be 100 here. 99.
101 according to my phone, so that'd be over a
Is
week.
that what it is right now?
And now on to our next hot topic of the work session.
Hot, really hot. Topic. I know we got a PowerPoint put together. It's being added to the packet by the clerk. But really, thank you. This has been an ongoing process of going through everything today. As your board may be aware, Metro Council heard from their chief operating officer this morning. We had staff from housing attending that while you were all meeting to provide any updates or information in addition to the emails that were provided to your board for your review over the lunch hour. So I put the slideshow together so that it can be in the packet for general availability. So today we'll do a quick review of what Metro's Chief Operations Officer or COO submitted to her council as far as findings and recommendations. We'll review some proposed talking points. I handed out a sheet that has them all on one page, but they're also included in the PowerPoint presentation, and then quick check-in about the next steps for your consideration. Two things. First is what further information needs you have as this situation continues to unfold. And second, seeking your approval to move forward with drafting a letter to send to Metro's council based on what we'll talk about as far as the draft talking points and any further information you would like included in that, if that's the direction of your board. So first, moving into the findings and recommendations that were presented to Metro's council this morning. First, Metro COO provided key findings. Yeah, it's going to be tough to read. This is a exact copy of what was emailed out to the supportive housing service or the affordable housing stakeholder table group that the chair shared with your board. So,
So it's in
the email.
the COO's email.
It's in the COO's email that was forwarded to your board this morning. I just wanted to put it into the slideshow so we could quickly review it. There's a number of findings that express the information that they heard from multiple sources, primarily the stakeholder table process, direct interaction with some additional partners, communities of color, and other associations, as well as through numerous polls that they've had out in the field related to this. So these findings are the COO's summary of what they took back to their council as the general viewpoints that they heard through those engagement processes. This led them down a path that we'll talk about for recommendations, but the COO expressed that there was consensus with the majority of stakeholders and community members related to these 6 bullet points. I think of important note, there's a lot of comments about the beliefs of others, not necessarily reflective of the facts that have been provided by the counties. In addition to that, the COO noted that there were other ways that people split their opinions out that relate to the rate cut potential or threshold changes for who pays into this tax. And then a recognition was provided to her council that there are folks who do not support any changes to the tax at this time. And that we need to do more as a collective of 4 local governments to show how we can continue to build out this process under the current parameters of the SHS measure. So those were the key findings that were presented and included in that email. From there, the COO made recommendations to her council. First, is just generally, because the initial conversation was centered around the creation of additional resources for affordable housing development and not originally intended to be a discussion about the efficacy of the supportive housing services measure, the number 1 recommendation is to continue the advocacy from Metro to do more to reduce the cost of housing at this regional, state, and national levels, which is something that I believe this board has consistently and repeatedly put into our agendas at the federal and state levels. Number 2 is related to how the conversation changed over the course of the advisory table conversation related to the use of supportive housing services dollars to achieve the goal of affordable housing, and turned into a conversation regarding the efficacy, transparency, and governance models that had been created to support the SHS program, which included an intergovernmental agreement that dictates how the counties and Metro relate to one another under the terms of the original ballot measure, and set up oversight as well as obligations on both sides. The second recommendation is to look into that IGA and work with county partners to make modifications to the IGA where appropriate. This is a heavy lift, and her recommendation was that they complete that modification outside of any ballot measure by the end of this calendar year. That is doable without changes to the ballot measure for many, but not all things, but would require your board's agreement to that intergovernmental agreement if any changes to be made. It would be an issue. It would require the participation of a large amount of county staff and the elected officials to make sure that we can reach an IGA that makes sense and does not overly burden the county.
Karen?
Yes.
Doesn't the IGA we have now work pretty good? Except for Metro? Aren't the 3 counties pretty happy with the IGA?
I can't speak for the other counties. We have been working under this IGA for 3 years and found that we have been able to meet the requirements under the IGA and provide the information back to Metro as needed. There's been one piece that has not been met, and we are well on the way for data sharing purposes of meeting that obligation and reaching that agreement, which is a separate IGA. But we have felt that we can work under and have been successful in implementing programs under the current IGA.
If you're observing, Commissioner Willie, and I am not intending to put words in your mouth at all, I think you know that, that Metro seems to be the party having the most difficulty with achieving what is on their brain. Yes, Metro seems to be having, I would be in agreement with your observation that Metro seems to be the one having the most difficulty.
From a staff resource, it was a heavy lift just to have this IGA. Parties that would need to be involved would include housing staff, county council, finance, county administration. So it is not just one department that's impacted, it's multiple and significant amount of hours in the original negotiations, and I would expect the same in this.
And I remember the multiple stops we had here with the board on those draft IGAs. Yeah.
The third recommendation that the COO presented to her council this morning was that there is authority within the ballot measure for Metro Council to adjust the tax rate and the threshold, income tax threshold. And her recommendation was that Metro authorize their staff to undertake that process starting in the 2024 income tax year, instead of waiting for a ballot measure to make that related specifically to the income tax threshold. So the minimum amount of income, personal income that one makes before one pays this tax.
Question.
Yes.
In bullet number 1,
Mhm.
and I don't want to seem like I'm too myopic, but it says to support cities. Is there a reason the counties were left out of that sentence?
I do not know, and I did not catch that until just this moment. The traditional local government that's intended to build and develop urban levels of housing are cities. So I think that is where that concept comes from. However, recognizing the extensive urban unincorporated areas, the expectation from the state about what development levels should look like in all areas where residential housing is built, that should be modified. We can speak to Metro about that.
Well, Clackamas County and us are in the same situation, even
Correct.
Multnomah County in these parts. So
Mhm.
I didn't know if it was an oversight or whether there was a reason that was that way.
I don't know what the reason is, and I will work to correct that oversight.
If I could just comment to that, Roy, with a jaded perspective on this whole process anyway. You put support cities in there, so it's no longer about 3 counties. It's about 3 counties and a whole bunch of cities inside those counties. And when you broaden the net, looking for support, saying, hey, cities, we got a good deal for you here, where you're going to have a direct pipeline or much more say to this. We need you to get on board with us. Garnering support.
I just wanted to share that those 3 words to support cities are when Molly and I met with Metro COO before she presented, we had suggested that she take that out because it's a big can of worms and we haven't worked through what that means and how would cities be supported. So we had a lot of questions about that as well. So just wanted to share that with you, but apparently it was left in there.
Thank you, Marnie. And Marnie's here online because she was there for a lot of these conversations last week while I was out on vacation. And so she can answer more questions than I can probably. Moving on to the next slide. This is recommendation number 4 has a lot of sub-bullet points. So I broke them out across a number of slides just for readability purposes. And I won't go through all of them, but this is a major step away from the time crunch of pursuing a ballot measure until May instead of May of next year instead of November of this year. There's a list of things that would be included in that ballot measure for further conversation and consideration across multiple interested parties that have been participating in this conversation related to SHS reform. Number 1 is the main one where they started drilling down and connecting the affordable housing into the SHS dollars is to expand the potential legal uses of these dollars to include the acquisition, construction, and preservation of permanent affordable housing and permanent supportive housing. The question becomes very quickly, are we losing services in order to support housing? And is that the highest and best use of these dollars? And that is an ongoing conversation that everyone is having before anything moves forward in May. From there, it goes into the 3 buckets that we've talked, besides that one, which is the bucket of use of these dollars. It also, the remaining recommendations for consideration are around governance structure, which is covered in point C. And
Before you go to C.
Yeah.
I haven't had the opportunity yet to read this 54-page PDF document. But I'm hoping that on item B, strengthen SHS commitment, blah, blah, blah. I'm hoping that that document describes what that means. Because the 3 counties have implemented to that commitment. And I believe that the 3 counties certainly have understand that, but I don't know what the Metro Council understands. If you understand, please help me.
Based on the conversations that I've been participating in, it's a combination of 2 concepts, I think, is one, that we are not moving away from the populations that we've been trying to serve if we expand the use types of these dollars, so that we remain committed to reaching those population A and population B, as we've shorthanded through our conversations around SHS. What strengthening that means, I think, is still up for conversation.
I would say what's needed is to clarify what Metro, especially the Metro Council, needs to understand.
And from the report back I got from housing staff over the lunch break is that I think some counselors have expressed a need for better understanding and clearer shared definitions. And that does not require a ballot measure necessarily. It can be done through clearer communication. Moving to point C, this is very much about the governance structure being changed currently pursuant to the ballot measure and the IGA. There are 2 independent boards that relate to these SHS funds. First is the SHS Oversight Committee, and the second is the Tri-County Planning Body. And this would eliminate one of those, eliminate both of those boards and include the affordable housing oversight work into one complete, and they're calling an investment board at this time because we can't agree on anything related to this change of structure, including what we would call this singular entity. Included in that is who would sit on that board, as they're calling it at this point in time, and what their purview would be, but they would eventually make recommendations up to the Metro Council, as they can't actually adopt policies for Metro or for the counties. From there, further.
Are you moving on to where are you?
I'm at 4C.
4C.
So continuing on to 4D.
Can I comment to 4C?
Please.
The most important thing, first of all, whenever they say start the sentence with strengthen SHS commitment, it says to me, what are we doing wrong? We're not doing it right. We're not doing it well enough. So they're saying, no, we need to strengthen that because, well, anyway. And then establish.
It might be helpful if they could clarify, what is it that they're seeking to understand better?
What do they not understand that what we're doing?
Yes.
And then you move to C and you say, establish clear, more independent oversight. We're going, no, I'm sorry. I think we're doing that too. Pretty darn good. But then I look at by creating a single independent investment board appointed by the Metro Council. You don't need to go any further than that. Metro Council wants to take over this process. So how well represented are we going to be honestly in this, on this investment board? And is this going to take the place of what you're on, Catherine? The oversight committee?
Both of them.
Both
Yeah.
the oversight committee and the Tri-County Planning
Right.
Body.
And so, again, I highlighted that appointed by the Metro Council because thinking, wow, this is a coup. This is not a renegotiation. So now go ahead, move on. Have more comments, Val.
It's pretty clear it's no longer a partnership.
Absolutely.
To that end, and to
Tuned.
And I understand. I just think the other side question, is this legal what's happening? And does it
Not illegal for the Metro government to choose to explore topics. There's
I
nothing
understand that.
illegal about that.
I understand that. I'm just asking about the restraints of the IGA.
And we can come back to you with that information or provide it
And
for you.
I don't want to take time here.
Yeah.
We can move forward.
I think what landed with me was, this is a voter approved something. And we have an IGA, so to the point the chair is mentioning, like renegotiating, there's a lot of,
Usually IGAs have mutual agreement terms. So our staff has taken the assignment to take a fresh look at those IGAs and come back to us with clarity. We are not going to have all the clarity today. But this is just the basic mechanics.
if there's nothing further on D, E, or F
For now,
a lot of questions that I've noted. G through J are the final pieces of what was recommended by the COO. And these go to the revenue picture, a combination of whether or not there should be requirements to go towards capital investments for affordable and permanent supportive housing. With how we identify that, if it's an allowed use, it can be an allowed use. Whether or not that needs to be in the ballot measure, I think is a outstanding question. The extension of the sunset through 20 or 30 additional years has been put on the table, as well as a reduction in the personal income tax, which are H and J. And then there has been a fresh conversation between Metro and the cities about their roles, responsibilities, and resources in these conversations around supportive housing services, and what lies on their plates versus what we do as counties, and how that looks different in each county is how I'm going to phrase that. There's a lot of different, 24 cities have 24 opinions about how their counties have coordinated with them or provided them with the resources they would like to see, and what might actually need to be reformed within the ballot measure to accomplish more city goals is also up for conversation. Before I move from this slide, thoughts?
I'll just share, based upon the meeting that Chair Peterson, Jessica Vega Peterson, of Multnomah County, and myself as Chair of Washington County had with the Metropolitan Mayors Coalition executive team. I am pleased to hear that the city of Sherwood now has an expressed interest in affordable housing. That's progress.
So the part about the funding of it, specifically directed at personal income tax, I think key part of this was to me is the fact, they say in one sentence that they're going to inflation index it, and on the other side, they're going to say, well, we're going to reduce the rate, but we're still going to tax only that specific segment of people. So I don't, and then we're going to raise more money. And anyway, the whole thing is just, I'd just like to have a little fresher look on it. I am not a fan of homelessness. Is not a problem of the rich. It's everybody's problem. So let's talk about broadening the funding of the problem.
So the other thing that is a reminder, that I don't know that it has been said yet in this presentation, there have been no money conversations from Metro. They talk about indexing, they talk about reducing rates, but they haven't produced any information about that is available to us as elected officials to better understand that. And that maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised.
I was gonna say they projected $250 million for this and it's over 400 now, so they could go to
New
work.
income
be in the-
tax,
Yeah,
new income tax.
This-
They've learned conservative government forecasts. You know, we've been over that, as well as how the cost of delivering is 50% greater.
well, that's, I'm not.
I know you're not
questioning funding.
disputing any of that.
Anyway,
Karen, I have a question about age, the sunset years.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a number or?
Much like the specifics around the revenue conversation, we have not gotten to, at the table of interested parties, we have not gotten to an actual conversation around what that looks like. Numbers have been put on the table between 20 and 30 years at this point in time. We are 3 years in to this 10-year project, and it would be an extension from that 10 years out in an unidentified number. My assumption, and I believe part of the conversation with, no, I don't think they even had the specific conversation with the Metro Council this morning about what they would like to see that number to be. That is part of the ongoing work that they would come back to the Metro Council if there were to be a referral in May 2025. Anything further on this slide?
Not for now.
Finally, included in that email were 2 other statements around recommendations. If the Metro Council were to pursue a ballot measure, one is a recognition that there needs to be an elected to elected table and work group that is brings in this money conversation. It's a half step towards partnership.
Elected to elected means outside of the Metro Council.
It means Metro Council and County Board of Commissioner members.
Oh, really?
And possibly mayors.
No, it
according
says
to what is-
elected to elected.
Yeah, it doesn't say that.
yeah,
That's why
I didn't read that in there either.
And I assume it's whoever they decide. And it'll be as transparent as I assume, the Metro Regional Housing Stakeholder Advisory Table was. As in, they now have a web page that has the roster.
So,
These were- Go ahead, Marnie.
so I was gonna say that, based on the conversations I've been in, my understanding was it was Metro elected officials with county and city elected officials. And I can't speak to the transparency or the quality of those meetings, but that was the intent.
Again, in the last
24 cities.
sentence there, it says with the region cities, it doesn't say anything about counties.
Noted. And then the other group that they have tried to pull into these conversations because they are center to what SHS is intended to do is those with lived experience. What that looks like, again, as equally as clear as what a elected to elected conversation looks like based on this email. So to put some context around it, sorry, Commissioner Tracy, you have a question, I can tell.
I do have a question, and it's more of a, I'm asking for ground truthing from you, from everyone here. When I go back to when this started, the discussions began because there was a perception that there was no money left in affordable housing and a perceived excess in SHS. So can we access some of that money? That's what I remember as the starting point.
Yes.
It's gone from there 180 degrees for me to a much higher level of Metro control over any program that is into the future regarding SHS and or affordable housing. Is that right? Am I right?
You're not wrong.
Okay, okay, I just want to make sure. It seemed there was a beginning that was somewhat innocuous.
It's a wholesale redesign.
And it's just gone, it's grown exponentially into something that it's really hard for me to wrap my head around.
I think that's a fair assessment, Commissioner.
Okay.
And that actually speaks to the greatest takeaway for our housing staff who were watching the conversation with the council this morning is that there doesn't even seem to be agreement in the Metro Council as to the definition of the problem that they're trying to solve. Is it SHS reform or is it affordable housing? Because as you stated, when this conversation was initially raised and proposed and contemplated, this was about creating a use of these dollars instead of a new property tax measure or other funding source for purposes of developing affordable housing. And that conversation has branched much further outside of use to governance and rate setting and extension. Some counselors, I apologize.
But they're all seven, some basics.
Mhm.
We're all 7 members of the Metro Council present in this meeting.
Yes, based on my counting of the notes related to each counselor.
Was it a face-to-face, hybrid, or virtual meeting of the Metro Council?
I don't have that answer, and I will see if I can't get a teammate to answer it while we continue conversation.
Thank you. Other slides?
Well, the context is not on the slide, so a variety of things were stated about what they're trying to solve. Some commissioners or some counselors are very much focused in on creating resources for affordable housing and resources related to city development of affordable housing as well. So they got into a number of conversations around, or a number of questions around that. Other counselors very much were focused in on changing the oversight structure and the governance and what they're calling transparency and accountability. That conversation is where I think we've seen a major shift from the initial conversation, and it's not reflective of every counselor's goal in this. Some counselors did recognize the information that we have provided about what the SHS resources are actually capable and have the capacity to pay for isn't enough to add to. Counselors also acknowledge that we have made progress, as some counselors have acknowledged that we have made clear and obvious progress in dealing with the homelessness issues within our individual counties across all 3 counties. So some are taking on board what we have been putting out for the last 3 years as far as the information about how we're spending our money and what our plans are and how we are accomplishing those plans, providing that information through our annual reporting. As a note, I just got a message from Jess. They were all there in person. Right. So this was a face-to-face conversation. Other counselors focused in on what is happening with cities as part of this conversation and bringing them into this conversation. This was because they were focused on the affordable housing portion, and there is a contribution consideration of what cities have to put forward as that's been part of the financing stacks for the current affordable housing projects. All of the counselors appear to have appreciated the recommendation to not go in November. Some of them would like to still, but recognize that where that recommendation is coming from. So pushing it out to the May 2025 seems to have gotten consensus, because haste, not urgency. Urgency without haste is the theme I heard from these notes. I will also state that Councilor Gonzalez in particular stated that redistributing between the three counties is not on the table as part of this conversation. So that's a step in recognizing the work that we've been able to do with our funding, and appreciated that that wasn't part of the recommendations. And President Peterson framed this as wanting to see improvements on an already successful system. What that means right now, I think, is still up for conversation and debate and clarification, but wants to continue to create a better partnership through the process is the summary of what I'm seeing in these notes. So moving forward, the Metro Council, I think, is going to take on the COO's recommendations, push out any ballot measure conversation, and encourage their staff to continue to work with us to see what should and can be changed without a ballot measure, and then conversation around the ballot measure for what it is needed for. So that's the general context that I wanted to provide about how those recommendations were received. I'm happy to translate questions back to our folks who were able to watch to get their perspective. I will go back and watch this presentation later, obviously here today. With that, are any questions about the COO's recommendations at this point?
Yes, I have a few, but I don't want to get ahead in the line.
I don't think they're gonna be any different than mine. I got more than a few, but.
Okay, well, I'll just go then.
Okay.
Thank you. It just dawned on me, let me start there, that Metro is asking, in addition to the two things I summarized earlier, what they've asked us to do by the end of December, and then what they're asking us to do in advance of a referral, we're not going to be able to finalize a new IGA for something that the voters haven't yet approved, which means that there's really a third thing. They want us to keep delivering services using the existing voter approval, the existing IGAs through fiscal year 25. And it took us a good 8 to 9 months before we each had adopted the initial IGA. So it's going to take us up to 9 months to continue, once, if the voters approve such a thing, to complete IGAs and LIPs, as this is summarizing, which takes us through FY26. Why that's important? Those are 2 fiscal years that they would be counting on us to continue to deliver services without potentially having an oversight committee at all to inform them and to continue the level of transparency. So there's some part of the math that does not compute yet for me. And there are some Metro staffers that would understand that physiology. This is quite a leap. And what I mean by that is it's asking a lot of county partners that already don't feel like the word partners has been put into practice. So, wow. Thank you. I've learned an awful lot.
Can I stay with your thought there?
Yes.
Realizing that what you're talking about as the new IGA is going to take us a period of time and all that kind of stuff. I agree. But not all of this necessarily has to be in the IGA when they're talking about putting in the ballot the extension of the timeline, about modifying the tax rate, about whatever else they're talking about.
there's goes to voter approval.
All those
But it
things.
does go to disbursement of funds that our LIP has to react to.
Well, I agree with that, but
Yeah.
if you stop at the, what do they have to do to get the ballot ready, to get it, to go out to the voters? All the rest of this stuff is all this intergovernmental stuff.
Yeah.
What would seem to me is they're going to say is, okay, fine, if it's gonna take that long to figure this thing out, and quite frankly, the term that Nafisa doesn't like me to use is throwing the baby out with the bathwater. To me, that's the whole process. But if all they need to do is say, we're going to put that the ballot and we're going to modify the tax, we're going to extend the deadline on it, and we're going to generate more money.
And have better oversight,
Right.
better defined by,
Right.
don't know what.
And we're going to require that some of this money goes to affordable housing. So that's all they need to do. They don't need our permission to renegotiate this IJ until all that's done.
Mhm.
Then the voters approve it.
Mhm.
Then they come back and they say, get on board, because we got a new game. So I'm anxious. Jackie's been sitting back there on her tiptoes, ready to race to the table about Pam's legal issue. So maybe if you want to wait on that, that's okay. But it would be interesting to note what legal implications, what legal rights we have in this whole process. And it's not just us, it's all three counties.
So rules of procedure. The presiding officer, the chair defines who comes up to the table.
Okay.
Okay, so let's finish with commissioner discussion.
Okay.
And please note, we still have board and leadership communication.
But I got till 6 o'clock to be at Banks.
Thanks.
So, this is the last slide,
This is
right?
the last slide related to the COO. The rest goes into the piece of paper that's in front of you. I'd put it in slide form so there's availability to the public. The next step would be the potential county talking points. So I want to make sure that if there's other questions, as you contemplate, reread, and go through this, all of your staff will be happy to provide further information or seek further information.
No, let me contribute my thoughts just in reading the email from the Metro COO and not the document. So just from her summary email, it seems to now be expanding Metro's government reach to include substance use disorder and treatment services, the justice system via the regional investment strategy. That's a pretty big expansion of regional government. I also noted that it requires counties to conform to the Metro Council adopted regional investment strategy with key performance metrics defined by an independent Metro Council appointed investment board that is not accountable in any way to the voters. I can only imagine for the oversight, the SHS Oversight Committee members who have invested almost 3 years of time. Well, no, it's July. Over 3 years of time, how they may feel about this latest recommendation. Given Commissioner Treese put it well in our earlier work sessions on this, that there weren't really impact discussions. There was report out from the Metro COO to impact. That similar sort of thing also occurred at the SHS Oversight Committee as well as TCPB. So I'll just share those observations, which boggles my mind a little bit, having served as a Metro counselor for 3-4 year terms, and seeing Metro expand its support for achieving housing goals. I identify with cities having difficulty with reaching the direction that the state legislature and governor have been working on and putting into statute. I haven't heard our cities cheering that Metro has provided them much in the way of resources to achieve the state-directed housing goals, particularly or including those from Governor Kotek. And yet, an expansion into substance use disorder and treatment services and the justice system is something that they're expressing interest in. So it's quite puzzling. So I just wanted to share that early observation, especially in light of the fact that I have a one-on-one with Council President Peterson tomorrow. Why don't we, oh, also, I put a placeholder in wanting to come back to Ms. Angie about at least these 3 asks that this seems to be getting at of counties, despite giving us the funding for at least our staff's role in those 3 efforts.
So I want to take the board back to a conversation that I had with you about a month ago, based on my conversation with Metro of the desire to convene the counties, the 3 counties in Metro, to have discussions. This has been something that I've been encouraging Metro to do on a staff level for some time. I, at that point, had said, I feel this is rushed because for staff to be meeting, we still need to have our checkpoints with the board to get the policy direction. And wanting to be a good partner and not left behind in the conversation, our staff, and this primarily includes Marnie Kyle, Erin Doyle, Molly Rogers, Jess Larson, have been meeting with Metro on a weekly basis at Metro. So in person, at least a couple hours for each meeting. This was not planned work, and this was all done under the guise that Metro said they would be 100% definitely referring to the ballot this year. So now here we are. What I find in the recommendation is very high level. So given that recent experience, I have several questions on what that process looks like to be able to define what the impact on staff time is. I will refer back to just what I commented on, just what I know was needed to develop IGAs, LIPs before, and that is a cross section of our One Washington County team, including county council, housing, county administration, finance, GR. This is not including what could be the elected to elected conversations, your board's time on an already full agenda. So to the staff time, I think it could be significant. I have several questions on what that process looks like to be able to define what that quantifiably would be. It was a very different point in time working through the IGA and LIP because we weren't also delivering services simultaneously. So we still need to achieve the goals that we've set forward. And I think, Chair, this is where you were going to, we have to continue what we're doing at the same time working through that. So that's a whole nother layer of work. And I would need to sit down with the staff team and really understand more, but I feel flat-footed doing that because I don't really know from a process standpoint what these recommendations look like in a process and working as partners, because just as you've seen them, staff have seen the final document simultaneously as you.
And you've asked your colleague, the Metro Chief Operating Officer, about the process moving forward. And from what I understand from you, crickets in that regard. So,
And to that was that month ago. Staff have been meeting. It's only been verbal conversations that have been had. This is the first like real kind of solid document. And I have several questions, just as you've been asking your questions of what does it mean to the process and next steps. And I know our team does too.
so just to checkpoint.
Yep.
We have the talking points to potentially touch on, but you also had at least one question that you had about two questions, further info we might need, as well as the next steps with regard to a potential draft letter opportunity. So what's our hard stop timeline here, folks? I've got, this is on our calendar till 5, so.
I do have to be in Banks at 6, and I have to do a little preparation to do before I walk in. For me, it's a hard stop 30 minutes from now.
So we have 2 big things to go through. So let's go through the talking points and then come back to those 2 questions.
So this is just a quick reminder slide that we have shared with many partners that if we reduce SHS funding, this is what is on the line for services.
And I will say that I saw some glimmer of hope that at least some counselors are reflecting the information that the counties provided through that April 17th meeting, as well as all the other reports and everything we've done.
Yeah. So I've worked with Philip and Tanya and housing staff to create these talking points for your consideration. And first and foremost is this ongoing conversation reflects a need for actual and true partnership between the local governments. And in light of the relationship that your board has established with our city partners, including them as part of that partnership. So the first core talking point and the number one talking point is this is a regional thing that requires true partnerships between local governments to meet the obligations and expectations we set with the voters in 2020. The next major talking point is that we are continuing to deliver the promises that we've made to the voters, and we have the data to back it up, and that's what those sub-bullet points are under those. So as you create your conversations using these talking points, you can point to them. And that includes, and it's not hyperlinked in the slideshow because of everybody moving too fast, but the annual and quarterly reports are super transparently available on the county's website, and we'll make sure that that link gets put into the system. It's also in the version of the talking points. It's a separate document.
We've also been very transparent, and I want to compliment both staff and my fellow colleagues on this commission for having conversations in fully open, public, transparent work sessions, as well as board meetings. It's been exemplary. Thank you.
So those are the first 2 talking points. I'll move to the third slide so you can respond to them comprehensively, or the second slide, third talking point. Essentially, that if there is going to be any reform, it has to be done in partnership with the county, regardless of whether or not it's a ballot measure, changes to the implementation, or redesigning of the outcomes. And the sub-bullets, again, are reinforcing that. And to the conversation that the chair and Tanya have both had about the capacity that we have as a staff to continue these conversations, second major bullet point speaks to the fact that we're all stretched to meet community expectation. And if you're going to create a process for continuing this conversation, you have to be mindful of that, because we are implementing while negotiating and having these conversations. And that includes your board also does things other than SHS. You have a lot of major projects. Your staff is working with you to meet that, from your leadership team down to the implementation staff, even in just the housing program. So we wanted to capture those in the potential talking points. So at this time, welcome any comments, reflections on those, which then would lead into the potential of turning these talking points into materials for how we respond to press inquiries, but also in creating a letter, if that is the direction of the board, that we would provide to Metro Council, which we would bring back to you for your consideration next week, which we have reserved some time in the work session. So with that, I'm happy to take consideration, concerns, things we've missed, things you would like bolded that aren't there.
I just have a question on the second to the last bullet about capacity. Already stretched as we strive to meet community expectations. For me, that's community expectations for housing as well as all the other county services. And I'm wondering, were you wanting us to just focus on the housing and supportive services, or that and?
I believe
All
you
of
would like
our-
it. Your capacity, leadership's capacity, and staff's capacity across all things that we do as a county.
Yeah, okay, okay.
And I'm happy to make that adjustment.
Eyebrow. Sharon, what question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Aaron, I have a question. And we got letter from the city of Portland dated July 8th. So am I correct to assume that counties had this, sounds like they knew this was coming. They saw the recommendations and then they got ahead and sent in a letter of what their demands are, which basically somewhat is aligned to what the Metro is recommending anyway. But did the counties have an opportunity to take a look at the recommendations? And I know we were not meeting until today, so there wouldn't be but was there an opportunity to get ahead this and send our demands early?
I don't
Just like
believe
Portland.
the city or I know the counties had not seen the written recommendations, so we didn't know exactly what the recommendations were going to be until the email was received by the chair and shared out to staff and your board this morning. I don't believe that the city had an advance copy either. I can't guarantee that. The letter that the city council is reflective of a long conversation that they've been having about how these dollars should be spent, and I believe reflects that we didn't know what the recommendations were. They didn't know what the recommendations were going to be. However, that is my speculation. I cannot say for certain what conversations took place between Portland and Metro, independent of other conversations that have happened between Metro and the counties.
And just from my read, first I would say kudos to the mayor and the 4 commissioners. Good job on this letter. But this letter doesn't address anything further than what we experienced on the Regional Housing Stakeholder Advisory Table. Because there was discussion about, no, this isn't the right time. Look to the future. And what about May of 2025, right? As one example of pushing things out. So no, I don't see this letter as saying anything about having any information from the various staff meetings that jurisdictions have had, staff jurisdictions have had.
Yeah, I agree.
Across our area. Don't know if that helps you, Commissioner. Yeah. We, every elected body has the opportunity to send letters. As we've talked about, we only have 2 sets of board meetings this month, and we have a very long track record of considering draft letters in our public meetings and going from there. The Clackamas County Commission is not meeting again until Monday, July 22nd, the week of. So that's, counting yesterday, because today's only Tuesday, that's 2 weeks away. So could you remind us, please, of the council had a plan where the COO would make a recommendation and that they would then come back for further council discussion, potentially a public hearing related to a potential referral. What do we understand now as next steps for the Metro Council?
My understanding of the next steps the original plan was the recommendations would be made today. They would get direction from they were expecting to get direction from their council to go after a November ballot measure, which means they would have brought that back the week of July 22nd for both conversation with their council, but then a public hearing on the 25th, and then the board would act, or the 23rd or the 25th. Can't remember
Wait,
exactly.
can you repeat those dates?
Sorry. Yes. No, it was really fast. The original plan was for Metro Council to have their public hearing, I believe, on July 25th related to a referral for the November ballot measure, and then their final decision would be made the first week of August. I don't remember if that was the 6th or the 8th of August. I'm looking at a calendar. That's the only reason I can remember dates.
For the 25th, there was also a date that
I think there was their work session on the actual referral would have been on the 23rd.
Thank you.
Is my understanding. Based on the comments that were summarized from the council's meeting this morning, I don't believe that there is any intention or direction to the COO to pursue a November 2024 ballot measure. So I do not know, and I will seek clarity on when they plan to come back to their council with further conversation or feedback.
So what I'm taking from this is the COO has made a recommendation and we have no idea yet of what the council direction back to the COO is. Is that correct?
From the notes that I have, I only see consensus that waiting until May seemed appropriate. So I don't know what the further feedback and direction was. I will get that back to you as quickly as I can.
So for example, I have not heard council direction to tell the COO to operationalize all these different elements and therefore require or expect that the 24 cities and the 3 counties would be following the direction of the Metro Council or the COO. I haven't heard that yet.
It also said that the COO would be gone for the next 2 weeks in that note.
Yeah.
Just mentioning that.
Marnie might have additional information.
Well, I don't really, we just got these notes. Thank you to Jess and Nicole for sending them out quickly. And I feel like we need a little bit of time to absorb them and can probably come back with a more clear answer on the 16th because it sort of insinuates some direction, but it's not really clear. But these notes were taken pretty quickly. So I think we just need a little bit more time to digest them and interpret them.
Karen, is this recorded sessions?
Yes.
Can you share the link with us?
Yeah, I'll make sure you have the link.
Thank you.
I have one point on the talking points.
Mm-hmm.
In the spirit of cooperation and partnership, we are not addressing any advocacy position. And the advocacy position I'm particularly interested in is there was conversation about talking, I guess, with both state and federal partners about funding to help reduce infrastructure costs. And that has implications, and I don't know what they mean by that, but it would seem like in the spirit of cooperation that any advocacy in discussions with federal or state representatives about any infrastructure bank of money or how they purport to do it would include us in that conversation, our staff. Does that seem reasonable, what I'm saying?
Yes, what I hear you saying, Commissioner, is that the talking points don't reflect that we've had an ongoing commitment from this board to advocate for more resources for affordable housing at the state and federal level in our adopted agendas. I know that the GR team is coming to your board with an initial conversation around what our 2025 agenda will be, might be included there. If it is the desire of this board to add that to your talking points, we can work on adding that in as a point of agreement that it cannot be on the regional dollars alone, that there has to be state and federal. But I look to the board's guidance on inclusion in these talking
Finish
points.
the point. That's half of it. I agree. I think it ought to say that we have advocated. But see, infrastructure bank or whatever they're talking about that you mentioned earlier, we're going to seek monies, and they specifically were talking about cities, and that's where I brought the county.
Mhm.
Offset the cost. So if the idea is we can afford more affordable housing, if you all would reduce your fees a bunch, and that's sold to either the state government or the federal government without our participation, that's really not a partnership. So that's in my mind, I'm wrapping my head around that part about what they're doing behind the scenes. Everything, this might go dormant for the next 4 months, yet there may be lots of discussion on that issue. So I don't know. And if it doesn't make sense to you, that's okay. I just say I've got that issue.
I think in focusing on the talking points, it's reaction to the obligations that are being placed on us in the COO's recommendations, the conversation about what the county would advocate related to infrastructure and housing financing. I think it's a government relations team agenda setting conversation to have with your board next week.
Doesn't have to be on this. It's a different discussion.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So would your board like staff to draft a letter for your consideration at the July 16th work session to send to the Metro Council related to the talking points that we've created?
I'll weigh in on these talking points. I like your talking points. I'm okay with turning it into a letter. I read the document. It's a huge 50-some
Yep.
pages, but I did thoroughly read the recommendations.
Mhm.
Each recommendation, there is an explanation section they provide. I sort of glanced that section. From what I understand, higher level is that Metro is exercising their oversight authority here. So, what I like about your talking points is you're really focused on not creating us versus Metro kind of a way, us meaning counties versus Metro. You're focused on partnership, what's in it for the county, let's work together. And I think you're on the right track to negotiate changing these recommendations to how and it benefits the counties and what we like to see. So I think you have plenty of room for negotiations to sort of at least have some wins, because some of these changes are winnable, in my opinion.
So I'll also say that these talking points and this framing is also a result of my direction in having discussions with the team members, and moving forward, I would like to continue to work with Ms. Doyle and Ms. Angie with regard to the next steps. But I can no longer be worn out by commendations and permutations of 5 different people. There's a problem there.
And are you talking about us?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't mean this 5.
Okay. I would just like to say, I hope that our strategy includes when it's important to keep your powder dry, when it's important to go for it. That's the only thing I'd add there, that I don't necessarily want to get a letter ready and shoot it off if that's not in our best interest. Might be that we wait and see what the other counties are doing. I don't know. I'm suggesting that you and Catherine and Tanya have been in this milieu for a while, and I respect where we are to date. I will use your talking points. I like them, but as far as communication with Metro, I don't know that I am the one that can make any of that determination. I'd rather get guidance from you.
I would recommend a letter from our board to match the letters that are coming in and expected from more cities and to match the work that Clackamas County has put in creating a letter. I think now is the time to, particularly given that they are asking us to put in a lot more capacity from our staff, they need to answer the question as to what that looks like and what they are demanding of us over the next 6 months.
And that's the guidance I would hope for. Thank you.
Mhm.
I think all three timeframes.
Yes, yes.
I did agree.
All three timeframes, not just the 6-month one of December 2024.
Yeah.
So I think what I'm hearing is, I'm just trying to wrap this up. On the first item, draft letter, yes, put together a draft letter using this as well as the concerns that you've heard expressed here. On the second one, staff continue to have discussions with staff.
Yes.
From metro cities and other interested parties.
Which would include other counties, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Staff, yes, yes. They have been doing that, but we got to be clear.
No, I just wanted counties included.
Because the elected to elected conversations have been happening and will continue to have in reflecting this board's position and direction.
Mhm.
And our staff has been very true to that. And then on the third thing, continue updates to the board at work session and in written memos as needed is great. I'm reminding myself that after June 16th, our next meeting is like August 7th or so.
6th.
6th.
Thanks, Beckma.
So it means that commissioners in all of our various travels, please do your best. Staff and I will commit to, if there is something that is hot in your inbox, I'll send you a text like I have in the past to just call your attention to that. And once you're on vacation, August 3rd or 4th, go be on vacation from both of your jobs.
Yeah, the 6th happens to be my wife's birthday, and I think we're in, I'm not sure which country, but unlikely that I'm going to get back to.
We do not expect you to be on email for county and clean water services business.
I don't have
for
to do a PAM.
the entire time frame of your
I was
vacation.
on vacation. I was working.
Oh, man,
Okay,
that's true.
right? Board, we're all thumbs up on that?
All right.
Appreciate it. Appreciate your guidance and ongoing patience with this conversation. We will work to draft a letter reflective of this conversation and bring it back to you with any information we have next week. Thank you.
So we do have some board and leadership communication to go through. I want to make sure, maybe Ms. Angie is bringing this to your attention, but I need to get it off of my plate. Our organization has received public records requests or has asked for county comment relative to the Measure 110 funding and proposals that OHA has decided upon. So in anticipation of media articles, our GR team went through and communications went through information with me. I've approved a quote. As usual, if there is some county response, our staff will share that in your inbox.
So just for ease of pointing
Please.
to that, you will see an email in your inbox from Julie McLeod this afternoon at 3:23 with the article and information.
Okay. Great. Why don't you just go through leadership communication and then we'll do board communication.
I'm going to punt and defer to Courtney because I was on the wrong screen for my notes. So if you don't mind.
I don't mind. I actually was going to say they're really, given the time and the long day you've had, I don't think there's anything I need to update you all on legally. We'll continue to communicate with you as we do every week if there's anything of import. I did want to mention that I will be on vacation half day on Friday. It's sort of a working vacation. My daughter is in a play from her camp, so I just took the day so I wouldn't be distracted. But should you need me or Miss Angie needs me, please call. That's it.
So now I'm ready. So of course I have to talk about the weather, don't I? I mean, isn't that on top of everyone's mind? So emergency management has been keeping our departments and partner agencies and you informed of the extreme heat that we've been experiencing since last Friday. A series of multi-agency coordinating meetings began just before the onset of the heat wave and concluded earlier today. Given the improved temperatures that we're seeing in the forecast, whew, that's a relief. It is important to understand that hot weather is expected, though, to continue this week. Our departments and partners continue to stay vigilant and responsive throughout the summer, but the National Weather Service plans to expire their excessive heat warning by 10 p.m. this evening. For context, Hillsborough just hit 102 degrees this afternoon, which is the expected high. Tomorrow's high will be 91 degrees. Want to highlight and lift up just some Washington County responses during this heat event. The emergency shelters, Washington County opened 2 overnight cooling shelters for the unhoused at noon on Friday, July 5th. One at the Beaverton Community Center, which is operated by Just Compassion, and the other at the Washington Street Conference Center in Hillsborough for Project Homeless Connect to operate. Across the 2 sites, 14 people sought shelter on Friday, 41 on Saturday, 34 overnight on Sunday, and 40 last night. So I want to share this data because we are seeing an increase in our utilization of these overnight cooling shelters time over the last couple of years that we've seen the heat events. What that means is that, number one, there's the learning that this is an available service here in Washington County during extreme heat. And also, I do think it does speak to our nonprofit partners who are operating that also have connections throughout the community and are also able to promote this.
Tanya,
important.
I walked over at noontime just to see what was going on over there and how it was going. They were very positive, the Project Homeless Connect people, and mentioned that this cooling center was very effective because it actually was cool, but there was also a feel that it was a very safe environment where people could be trusted. And I thought that was an interesting comment, and kudos to us for making that facility available. So thank you.
So the cooling center, thank you for lifting that up. The cooling centers work closely with animal services too, if there's a need, and we've been keeping pets safe throughout this time. We also are focused on keeping employees safe. Yep.
The Beaverton shelter, operated by Just Compassion, has great signage. People are welcome. I go by that facility quite regularly, and there are additional folks taking advantage of it. So I wanted to make sure I gave fair or did my part to provide fair thanks and coverage.
Thank you for lifting that up as well. So as you know, we have employees in virtually every department or office in our organization that work out in the field during this weather. We do ensure that we follow state requirements requiring all employees who work outdoors are provided the water, access to water, more frequent, longer rest, periods of shade or in-condition vehicle, also staggering work times, changing work times and schedules. So just huge kudos to our many supervisors across the county for this work. Also, our critical facilities are still operating in the conditions of this heat. However, facilities is taking a very closer look and time spent, especially in the jail during this heat event. On Wednesday, one of the dryers in the jail did catch on fire. Staff don't believe the fire was a mechanical issue or tied to other machines in the facility, but we are waiting for that facility report. Luckily, because the conditions within our jail facilities team was on site because they were addressing a chiller issue within the jail. So quick response by the team, and just appreciate the facilities team, and you saw them report here very quickly. They are hopping right now along with other members of Washington County. On Friday through Sunday, I will be in Tampa, entering more heat again for the NACO conference. I will be participating in several panels focused on county administrators and big ideas in local government. And that
So
concludes
our
my
heat
update.
wave here in the Pacific Northwest will be migrating east. Ooh. Sorry to you all.
Started in the
Stay out of the hurricanes.
So we heard from Ms. Taniguchi Dennis earlier, so now we're into board communication. So Commissioner Willie, you want to go first since you need to depart?
1 minute. Yeah, so let's see. Okay, so Romac last week had a field trip and we were able to wander around through county roads out in the country, find out what the pavement condition looks like and what roads are going to need some attention out and about. So there's a number of them. They're doing a great job. It was fun to do that. So just to hear all of what's going on. I didn't know that Metro owns a whole bunch of acreage out there in the country that I didn't know that before. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Last Thursday, I attended another Rotary luncheon representing Hillsborough Community Foundation, but also because my wife received that Rotary Club's highest award for service. So I needed to be there and say congratulations to her. Went out on a Salmonberry Trail project event, I guess, with Travel Oregon and just introduced them to a few things. We actually got rained on a little bit, so that would be nice today. We could have a little of that. Council of Forest Trust Lands, we continue to, we have now met with representatives from all counties and presented what our recommended options. And so we'll need to follow up with that. I am scheduling meetings with schools superintendents that are impacted by our $10 funds. And then probably second tier to that is I will need to have conversations with the other school districts because we are recommending that the state backfill these school dollars with state school fund, which is going to impact, of course, more pieces of the pie. The same size pie, just more pieces. Went to the Adelante Mujeres Civic Leaders graduation with the chair and Nafisa. Yeah. For some reason there was a blank spot in there. And so I'll let you two talk about that.
There.
Huh?
I was there, I promise.
I know. We all had to wear little things so that somebody could interpret for us.
Oh,
So,
yeah,
yeah. Went to the Acre meeting last week as well. Attended as a street marshal for the 4th of July parade, where our very own Sheriff Massey was, of course, the Grand Marshal. Very happy about that. And then got a number of things going on. Just remember, upcoming is the county fair. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on. I'll probably forward to you rather than read you all of the events that's going on. I'll just forward you an email that I got from Leah. Lots of fun stuff going on at the fair. The fair is the 19th through the 28th. And yeah, I don't know, if you want to get up really early, you could come cook pancake breakfast with the fair board, the last 4 days of the fair, just in case had a slow morning or something like that. I'm heading for Banks tonight to give kind of a quarterly update that's become more 4 or 5 months since I did that. And Gaston City Council tomorrow night. And then I have coffee with Laura Dexheimer of the North Plains Food Bank. See how they're doing it.
With regard to banks, CPO 13 recently had a meeting and asked our staff to give them an update on, or an overview rather, not an update, on the Council Creek Regional Trail as it would, particularly as it would extend from the Cornelius Forest Grove area up to the Banks Vernonia Trail. As we know, prior commissions adopted a master plan, but that's it. There's no ongoing work with that. Unfortunately, some of the folks who attended that meeting did not get a clear message that while there is a master plan that has been adopted by the county, there is no activity going for doing any planning, further planning through those rural areas. So there are some people who are inquiring, including of me, about what the county is doing. So please just be aware that that meeting happened, a whole variety of levels of understanding from folks who attended or have simply heard about the meeting.
Yeah, Diami led that conversation, and yeah, I didn't get any feedback that there was anybody unhappy or confused, but certainly it's a concept plan and it's kind of on a map, and I don't even know that we've identified the right of ways that we would have to acquire, how that would go to get that done. We're pretty much focused on getting the 6 miles done between Hillsborough and Forest Grove, which is going to take us till 27.
So just it's a
29.
reminder to all of us that for each of the 4 of you district commissioners, your district area from the folks who have the opportunity to elect you also happens to be in my district. So I tend to hear some things that maybe you don't.
Oh, I thought maybe you were going to volunteer to go to Banks with me tonight.
I've never had that invitation.
My turn? I'll go. And I'll try to go quickly here. No, I'm not going to talk about what my future is. We just got an update from Brenda for everybody. You could see what my meetings are.
Was that another email?
Today.
Okay. I don't read
I know.
emails during the meeting.
So,
Fully present.
I did attend the acre meeting. We had a good discussion on housing. That was
a good discussion, and you do a good job. So's the other co-chair.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was
Very engaged group.
yeah, they were, and we had 2 new members there as well. So that was good. I had a meeting with
1 acre, I assume the county finally helped them develop a work plan, but I want to make sure that the work program for community involvement specifically to CCI and CPO goes before acre.
I'll make sure that happens.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I had a meeting with AOC about the upcoming District 8 meeting. It's scheduled for September 11th. I believe it's on your calendars, and Ada and I are working with Megan's help on doing basically the same type of thing we did last year. And I have a sponsor for this year as well. So that's all in the works. And given our discussion today, that may influence what we talk about. Who knows? So that the agenda is yet to be determined. I attended the ERMDAC meeting. We talked about the sidewalk repair grant process, and that was again a very good meeting. And they came up with a group agreement on how they will operate into the future, that they will put, that they put into their bylaws. So that was a good discussion. Couple things I want to bring up so that you're aware. There were at the MPAC meeting, Mayor Rosner asked a few questions about the industrial land forecast as part of the urban growth report work. And he followed up with an email to the Metro staff. I've been talking with our staff about this as well. And it was basically the questions had to do with the steepness of the slopes that are rated for buildable industrial sites. Metro uses a 25% steepness as to identify what inventory is available. Mayor Rosner and others were saying what's acceptable in the marketplace, so to speak, is a 7% slope. So he asked the question, why did you choose 25%? And is that a reasonable number? And they're coming back with information. I just wanted to bring it up here so that you know what's happening in these discussions. The other thing I wanted to bring up is that the West Side Multimodal Improvement Study wrapped up. I've reported on that all the way through here, but I want you to know that it is now, there is a final recommendation. It's posted and it includes the problem statement. If you'd like me to go through that, I can do that.
What would be very helpful is if you sent an email to us with
Sure.
the information.
Absolutely.
And and make sure you clarify any particular role for the county with regard to this recommendation and moving forward.
Okay, thank you. I'm done.
Could we, oh, never mind, I'll do it. Never mind. Next. Who's
I'll-
next?
I'll go next. I've been on vacation. I have nothing
Yeah.
significant to report, and except to say that this week I'm also traveling for the NACO conference.
You're going to the Summer NIC conference?
Yes, Tampa.
What days are you traveling or what days are you gone for that?
Check. Oh, good. Oh, what days?
Because the rolling agenda doesn't have it. It only says NACO.
Says NACO, the days I'm gone?
No, it only says NACO.
Oh. Oh. I apologize. I'm gone tomorrow, no, Thursday. Back on Tuesday. Thank you, Brenda.
So you'll be here
Calendar.
for.
I
our
will be here
meetings?
for our board meeting, yes, Chair. And then also the other thing I was gonna add, thank you for this reminder, actually, it reminded me. I will be able to attend JPAC meeting, the TV Highway Steering Committee meeting, and then that Monday for WCCC. So there's no shoveling of alternates needed because the WCCC is a virtual meeting. And we will update the rolling agenda, Chair. So I'll put it. Really,
I'll make it quick too. First of all, probably everybody else has done it, but I have not. Erin Wardell, congratulations on your new appointment. She was here earlier. I don't see her. I think that's great that we were able
yeah.
to promote her to a position of that importance in the county. To Sheriff Massey, I'm sorry, we all couldn't have probably attended that memorial today, but we have been going all day. So my condolences there. You did well on the Hillsborough Parade. She did as a Grand Marshal. I had a chance to talk with her and two of her children, and so they were very delightful. They seem to be very pleasant people. I've got a Friday.
You were at the parade? What?
Yeah.
Oh, me too.
Yeah.
I didn't see you.
You
I saw
did?
Jerry.
Oh, you did? Yeah. I have a meeting this week with the Work Systems Inc. For those of you who knew Jenny Weller, who was there forever, she retired and there's a new person, and it's I asked her for the agenda. She hasn't quite gotten that out, but you got to forgive somebody brand new. They're trying to figure out how doing things. I'm supposed to meet tonight. I was telling Tanya, I'm trying to fit that in with the I guess, a couple of folks from the county in regard to our budget process, also have a meeting with WA. And then one thing I wanted to follow up really quickly with you, Tanya, on is that it's very important to me. One of the things that's a huge issue in regards to independence is what we call familiarity. I brought that up in regard to the audit committee, and it just stuns me that a county this large, this diverse, meaning activities, number of things we do, no comments, no adjustments, no anything. I really think that Greg needs to come back with something.
I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Oh,
I have no idea what you're talking about yet. So keep going.
okay. That Greg Munn needs to come back and say, the auditor is telling us how they're meeting that issue of being independent of us in regard to the audit. That's what's important.
Hey, what?
The auditor, the
No.
auditing firm, the auditing
audit.
firm.
The financial auditor.
Right. The financial auditor has an obligation to be independent and to have the appearance of independence. And one of the big deterrents in all of that is what we call familiarity. It's a familiarity threat. And when you have a county with this many activities and all of the things that we do, it stunned me that there were no suggestions for improvements.
No suggestions for what?
Improvements, no past adjustments, which are things that they found. No adjustments, period. And it just doesn't feel right. And so I mentioned it when I gave a report out on that about, I don't know, a month ago or a month and a half ago. And I think it's important. It's real easy for the audit firm to overcome that. They rotate staff. That's the real easy thing, including partners sometimes. They're a big enough firm so that you get that independence. That's what I'm really thinking is important. So anyway, I just want to put the bug back in your ear again on that. I was auditor speaking.
Thank you.
I was auditor speaking too much.
No, you're
Yeah.
our rep to the audit committee, so it's very pertinent. I got confused by
Others.
independence and so close
the
to
parade.
United States.
I was speed talking. It was
wasn't
my fault. Yeah.
Context switching fast enough, so
It's all-
no worries.
It's my fault.
Phew. Okay, I'll try and be quick because noting the time, I already mentioned the MMC exec committee. Please note, switching topics. Your staff assistants are working to scope out board availability, and this is following up on the WCCC invitation to talk about MISTIP and future county budgets. So that's being scoped out. The third item, Commissioner Tracy reminded me that I have this on my list, and that is at MPAC on June 26th. Here are those notes. It was really interesting to see how community members used the public comment opportunity to bring information forward, both with regard to North Plains as well as Sherwood. So I just wanted to share, Stephen Roberts, I'm glad you're here. I believe there is a need to correct some of the public's understanding around what the how North Plains activities and referrals may or may not apply to the city of Sherwood.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's like, whoa, wait a second. But there is a farm alliance against the Sherwood expansion that has formed. There was also a person who was making reference to the Tonquin employment land relative to Sherwood. A few other folks speaking. But I think there's also a need to outline the purpose of the urban reserves with thoughtful UGB expansion, which I believe the metro process includes. But we've had a lot of changeover of community members as well as elected officials. that may not have known that they needed to get a briefing. Then there was, it was unclear to me, the relationship between the Tonquin employment lands with regard to the employment work that Metro's been doing for the UGR. Also, there was a point made by one of the commenters around urging the Metro Council to vote no on a Sherwood expansion request because of the need for infrastructure dollars. And I think this will go to, I think we need to urge Metro to be clear about the requirements that they have to meet with the urban growth report and any potential UGB expansion, and that we don't end up having to carry that burden, because it's not our role. It's their role. So I just want to make sure that it doesn't get pushed on us. Thank you, Commissioner Fye, for mentioning the upcoming TV Highway July 11th meeting. And I appreciate our LUT staff bringing the agenda forward. As our representative to that committee, you're being asked to take a position with regard to further information needs for the capital investment grant from the feds as part of the project design and cost. And I haven't heard you ask us for our input. And I also want to mention that I fully support, based upon the homework that I've been able to do from the availability of limited information from the steering committee, say that I support the recommendation for the station locations that are being proposed. So I think that I don't believe that the July 11th meeting, it's not the final meeting, but heads up to you and our staff, I would suggest that you work with Ms. Angie to get this topic brought to the board for our input with enough lead time so that your 4 colleagues have the opportunity to provide input and direction given your board liaison assignment.
Well, good. Thanks for having me.
Because that project spans at least 3 districts, so 4 of us. I didn't verify that TV Highway doesn't touch on your district. Yep. Yeah, it does. It's
Oh, it
yours.
does, that's right.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
1, 2,
Right down,
3
right down.
plus 4.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry to take so long. Anything else? Wow, what a long day. I'm impressed. Thank you very much. Multiple big topics. We try to avoid having just 2 meetings, only 2 meetings each month, but somehow every summer we do end up with a month where it happens, and it's always uncomfortable, but we managed to get through it. So good job, everyone. So we'll see you next Tuesday, July 16th.